I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sab's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the JB and Sabby show, which we just had. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on Rockfin, YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. I hope you've had a good week so far. We are going to start tonight with breaking news. It's not there in the thumbnail because it literally broke after I created the stream, but I can't end tonight without discussing what just happened in Israel. So we are going to make sure we cover Sinwar's death. We'll get into that as well. If you haven't done so, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you like the stream, fam. That helps me out with the algo. And welcome all. I want to start out by giving shout outs to people in the chat. What is up, fam? Let's go to the tippity top. Shout out to David. Sabrina, that interview was disappointing with Kamala and she talked over Brett. I think at one point they were both talking over each other, but we're going to get into that. That was an interesting discussion. Shout out to S. Jarrah says, like number 23. Love potion number 9. Since you're bringing up numbers. Greetings, Gigi. Hello, Sabby. In my opinion, it's a choice between an actual president, Stein, Oliver, De La Cruz, or West, and a choice for vice president of Israel, Trump or Harris. Y'all decide. Thanks, Sabby. Greetings. I know myself. Finally, a tough interview. And Cam's, that fake black woman, couldn't take it. Kudos to Fox, who would have thought. It's interesting because Democrats are saying the exact opposite. They're saying that she nailed it. We'll get into it. Greetings, Joanne. Thanks so much for bringing us the real news in a real way, Sabby. You're a steady source. Kudos to you and RBN. Thank you and welcome. Greetings, New York Varsity. Candace Owens, Lamont Hill, and Lord Jamar on Pierce today. What could possibly go wrong? I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I am going to check that one out. Greetings, Tim, though. I'm so sick of the black community worried about BS, so invested in who Diddy is screwing or what Beyonce is wearing, but not a word about a genocide. It's disgusting. Vote Jill Stein, y'all. Yeah, it reminds me like back in the day, I used to be really interested in celebrity culture. This like back in the day when like the celebrity reality shows were just starting. And I used to be really into that. And like as time went by, like I kind of got out of like that phase because I felt like a lot of those celebrity reality shows were the same thing. Rich people arguing about rich people problems, but it's an easy distraction. Shout out to Lawrence says free Palestine. Greetings, William says sup. Shout out to Hannah G says, I heard Kamala interview was bad. Shout out to Athos says, cheers, fam. Greetings, Salma. President Biden's Bible says the Hebrew word meshalom equals Muslim. Meshalom means a Jew/Christian devoted to God. Meshalom/Muslim are the followers of Christ in the Bible. Well, I see someone's been reading. Salma's been reading. Shout out to Casey says, I know everyone is congratulating Brett Barr for going hard at Kamala, but when it came to foreign policy, he just gave her crap about not supporting Israel enough. I really can't stand these people. Yeah, because he supports Israel, right? And honestly, I'll save that for the segment because I'm going to tell you guys what I think about that, like Republicans saying that she's not pro-Israel enough. I don't think that's actually helping Donald Trump. I think that's helping Kamala Harris. So I'll get into that. Shout out to CBC Voter says, happy Thursday, Sabby Sabs and Eric T. Red. What's up, CBC? Greetings, Chrome says, peace and love, Sabby. Shout out to Zen Soulful. Good evening, everyone. I don't know why I said your name that way, but what's up? Shout out to ACAB says, hello, everyone. Greetings, Ant Bank says, my pumpkin Sabby. You know what? My grandma used to call people pumpkin. My grandma used to say, come here, pumpkin. Yeah, sure. R.I.P. Yahya Sinwar. Make sure I pronounce his name correctly. I know, we'll get into that. Shout out to JB, my comrade from RBN says, good evening, everyone. Greetings, Brian. Says, good evening. Shout out to Shazmatica. Says, hello, Sabby. Hello, Famalam. I like that, Famalam. And shout out to Sebastian. Says, happy Thursday, y'all. Greetings, Bryce. Says, what up, everyone? What up, Sabby? Shout out to Roger. Says, drop that beat, Sabby. And greetings, Kaime. Says, let's do this. Lawrence Johnson, LOL. Love that. And greetings, Giza? Kamala said Trump would do this, but she did it. U.S. DOD Directive 5240, the 2024 version expands the military's role, particularly in assisting civil law enforcement, and authorizes lethal force. Ooh, I see she's been reading. Giza has been reading as well. Damn. And Wet Camera Inc. says it's been a wild year for sure. I'm telling you, remember at the beginning of the year, I told you guys 2024 is going to be wild. I didn't anticipate it to be this wild, though, by the way. Shout out to Kushan, says, hello, Sabby. I love your content. Thank you so much and welcome. Thank you guys so much. You're out here doing the damn thing. Really quick, we want to give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Yeah, thank you guys so much. You're also keeping the lights on around me. What is up? Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. They're also Sabbies. And one day I'm going to make this look even more creative, guys. I'm just, I'm not that great with that kind of stuff, but one day I'll make it look kind of cute, I guess. And also members as well. Thank you. And I want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for P. Bradley, Sandra Davis, and Gerardo Maza. Thank you. Thank you so much, Gerardo. I saw a video earlier of Geraldo Rivera. You guys remember Geraldo Rivera? He was a talk show host. I believe he's conservative. There was a clip of him circulating around on Twitter, and he was saying that he was surprised that Kamala Harris didn't do as well as he thought that she would in the Fox News interview. So that's interesting. But it's interesting because, like, when people mention Geraldo Rivera, what I remember about him is that he was punched in the nose twice. I think one time happened on his talk show, and I think one time happened when he was reporting on the ground. So, yeah, that's what I remember about Geraldo. He used to flirt with his guests, too. I remember that. He used to flirt with his guests, and I'm like, Geraldo, you're not doing it. Eric Gray says, I remember Geraldo Rivera's interview with Michael Jackson. I forgot about that. That's a good one. Yeah. FM said Capone's Vault Geraldo. I remember, man. I remember. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what are we discussing tonight? Let's go ahead and get into it. Show you that beautiful thumbnail. Roll that beautiful bean footage. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing Kamala Harris, Fox News, and Charlamagne the God interview. So I'm going to talk about highlights from both of those interviews. We'll dive into that. You can tell me, how do you think that she performed? We're also going to discuss Mehdi Hasan backs away. Yes, Mehdi Hasan, it was actually a viewer who sent me this video. Thank you for doing that. Trying to walk the line here, I guess, or ride the fence when it comes to who you should support for 2024 presidential election. And so we're going to get into that because I think this puts Mehdi in a interesting spot, considering the fact that he has been correct when it comes to Gaza. He is also Muslim, but he carries water for the Democratic Party. And I'm going to show you why he carries that water tonight as well. We're also going to discuss Trump gains young men. This is a new one. Case Study QB out there doing the damn thing. I was not aware of this. So apparently there tends to be a shift happening with young men when it comes to Donald Trump. And we're going to explain why. We're also going to discuss third-party fears. Oh, they are hitting corporate media left and right. MSNBC just can't stop talking about these third-party candidates. And we're going to get into that. And they're going to tell you why they're afraid and concerned and worried and damn and oh no. We're going to get into all of that, as well as a little bit of history of third-party and independent candidates in the past. That's right. We're going back to the Ross Perot days. Yeah. And then you guys still talking about Geraldo. Dale said Geraldo is delusional. Oh, man. And of course, we are going to cover breaking news about Sinwar's death. We're going to get into that story as well. That says a lot for this escalation that is happening, that Israel is escalating in the Middle East. We're going to get into that. And we are going to cover the Florida ballot measures tonight, fam. So if you live in Florida, tonight will be for you. So let's go ahead and get started with that first story. Oh boy. Earlier this afternoon, Israel reported that they have indeed killed Sinwar. Sinwar is one of the co-leaders of Hamas. So this would be the second Hamas leader that Israel has killed. What does this mean for Gaza? And what does this mean for Iran? Because the reality is Iran is not happy about this, just like they weren't happy about the previous Hamas leader that was killed. Does this lead toward some type of end to the genocide in Gaza? I wouldn't hold your breath on that one. Does it lead to escalation with Iran? There is a possibility. So let's go ahead and get started with this clip here. It was announced earlier today on MSNBC when they said they believe that he was killed. Let's dive in here.
Let's go straight to NBC's Aaron McLaughlin in Tel Aviv. Also with us, Jason Beardsley, former senior advisor to the Department of Defense and a former Green Beret. And with us by phone, former CIA Director John Brennan. Aaron, what more are we learning?
Hey there, Anna. Well, according to a statement released by the Israeli military, they are investigating the possibility that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, was killed during an Israeli military operation in Gaza. According to that statement, in an unspecified location of the Gaza Strip, they say that the Israeli military entered a building and
Oh, I don't know what happened there.
That it is not confirmed at this point. It is what they are looking at. If confirmed, this is a.
Okay, I don't know why this is doing this with the video. I wasn't doing that earlier. Let me just restart. Let me try that again. There we go.
Let's go straight to NBC's Aaron McLaughlin in Tel Aviv. Also with us, Jason Beardsley, former senior advisor to the Department of Defense and a former Green Beret. And with us by phone, former CIA Director John Brennan. Aaron, what more are we learning?
Hey there, Anna. Well, according to a statement released by the Israeli military, they are investigating the possibility that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, was killed during an Israeli military operation in Gaza. According to that statement, in an unspecified location of the Gaza Strip, they say that the Israeli military entered a building and 3 militants were killed inside of that building. And they're looking at the possibility that one of the militants was in fact Yahya Sinwar, although they cannot verify that. It is not confirmed at this point. It is what they are looking at.
Let's pause here for a second. So just to give you guys a heads up as well, there was a picture that was posted I can't post that picture on here because it shows obviously dead bodies, but there was a picture that was posted of what is believed to be his body.
If confirmed, this is a significant blow to the Hamas terror organization. He's seen as the architect of the October 7th terror attacks. Worth noting that according to the Israeli military, no Israeli hostages were found in that building where those militants were killed. We heard from Yoav Gallant, the Israel defense minister, on X tweet, "Chase the enemy and they will fall upon your sword. We will reach every terrorist and eliminate him." We know that Israeli officials have made the death of Yahya Sinwar a priority during this past year of war. We're also hearing from some of the relatives of former hostages. Thomas Hand, he is the father of 9-year-old Emily Hand, who was kidnapped from her kibbutz on October 7th, taken to Gaza and released as part of the first hostage deal. He just sent me a text saying, quote, "I am hopeful that his personal reign of terror has ended. I know that they will have many more to fill his shoes. I hope that this heavy blow to their command structure will help bring an end to this terrible war. Perhaps they will feel weakened enough to come to the table and finally make a serious deal to end the war and give us back our poor hostages after more than a year in brutal captivity."
Pause. Okay, let's talk about this for just a second. First of all, they are absolutely delusional if they believe that Hamas is going to come forward now and say, "Let's make a deal," after you killed one of their leaders. This is the second one that they have killed. So they are delusional if they believe that they're going to say, "Okay, let's make a deal now." I don't think that's going to happen. There was also a statement that was issued from Benjamin Netanyahu. There are a number of people that were online saying, "Great, okay, this is going to bring an end to the genocide now. They're going to end the war now that they were able to kill him." Netanyahu has delivered a statement that says the war is not over. So once again, what this shows you is that they have taken out 2 leaders of Hamas, and they still don't have all the hostages. And what I have warned people about with this before, they have said multiple times, even some of the hostages that were released, was that they're not going to give all the hostages back unless you do a ceasefire. Now, that came from hostages that were there that Israel did get back. They made that statement that, listen, they're not going to give those hostages back unless there is a permanent ceasefire. So the fact that this reporter seems to think that, okay, yeah, now they're going to want to come to the table and give the hostages back after you killed one of their leaders. No, we have to think about who this was that they just killed. So first of all, from what I remember, I don't believe he was the one that orchestrated the attacks on October 11th. Based on what I remember reading, I think the guy's name was Muhammad, who had orchestrated that. Second of all, what people have to know is, who is Sinwar and what did he come from? Sinwar grew up in a refugee camp. He spent years in an Israeli prison. Now, we've talked before on this show about what happens at the prisons in Israel and how they treat Palestinian people. So more than likely, he was possibly tortured, probably lucky to get out of there alive. Killing Sinwar doesn't stop Hamas. Killing everyone that is a Hamas fighter doesn't kill the ideology of Hamas. And I would argue that killing Sinwar and killing the previous Hamas leader, I would argue that what Israel is actually doing is that they are creating more people in Gaza to want to be resistance fighters. Because the reality is, when you see your people slaughtered all around you, when you see your people deprived and oppressed and occupied, and you see this genocide happening right in front of your eyes, and let's say you're one of the ones that lives through it, what do you think is going to happen with those people? What do you think happens to the children the children who are seeing all this happen right before their eyes. You think that makes them want to love Israel after what Israel has done to their people, killing these babies in hospitals? No, that's not. That's going to actually have the exact opposite effect. So this woman here who thinks that, oh, now they're going to want to come to the table. No, that's delusional. You are absolutely delusional. Let's go back in.
Again, if this is in fact confirmed, Anna, it has significant implications for the Hamas terror organization, for the Israeli hostages, the 101 of them still being held in Gaza, as well as the overall war, not to mention the Palestinian civilians in Gaza right now, Anna.
Erin McLaughlin, thanks for the reporting. We'll let you go so you can keep working the phones and work your sources to get more information here. John Brennan, your thoughts on this statement from the IDF. Would Israel put this out there if there was much uncertainty here? What's the likelihood that Sinwar was taken out?
So this is the CIA director, guys, or former CIA director.
Well, Anna, I think that Yahya Sinwar has been in the Israeli targets for the past year. He has been the priority target because he's been not just the architect of October 7th massacre, but also the unquestioned military and political leader of Hamas. And if they were able to eliminate him, and again, it's unconfirmed, but he may have been hiding, I don't want to say in plain sight, but above ground and not in those tunnels as a way to, mask his actual location from the Israelis who were going through those tunnels, believing that the command structure was there. But it would be a significant blow to Hamas. It would further decapitate the organization that has already lost a number of senior leaders. It's not going to lead to the demise of the Hamas militancy and terrorist organization, but it certainly will do a lot to degrade its capabilities as it now will be searching for a successor to Sinwar if, in fact, the Israelis can kill him.
Again, if it is.
So let's pause here for a second. And I want to debunk something that John Brennan said. He's like, oh, this is going to deliver a significant blow. I remember this type of propaganda from corporate media after the U.S. government captured Saddam Hussein. And I remember the same type of rhetoric where they wanted you to believe that now because they captured Saddam, like, oh, we got him, we got rid of him, folks, that everything was now going to be okay. And what happened after they captured Saddam Hussein? There was a new group that formed, and that was called ISIS. So this is what I want people to understand. When the U.S. government or Israel, they're aiding Israel on this, but they wanted this done too. When they go after these leaders of whether it's resistance fighters or whether it's a political leader of a country, when they take out these leaders, that doesn't stop the resistance. And even if, and I would argue, which has not happened, I would argue even if they were to eliminate all Hamas fighters, that would not stop the resistance. What then in turn would probably happen is that a new resistance would form. This is why I'm heavily against intervention, because what you see over time and time again, the people in Gaza right now, those that are left, number one, they're either starving or they are injured or both. And the fact that Israel happened to kill Sinwar right after the statement from the U.S. government and from Antony Blinken said that Israel has 30 days to allow aid to come into Gaza or we will withhold our arms. Does anybody find the timing to be a little bit suspicious to me? Because it seems a little bit suspicious to me. Now, all of a sudden, you're able to get Sinwar right after that announcement came from Antony Blinken. And that makes me wonder if you were able to actually get Sinwar prior to that. It makes me wonder if Israel knew where he was all that time, but they just wanted to slaughter all the people. And I think they do just want to slaughter all the people. They want the Palestinian people gone. Remember, we reported this recently that they had attacked a refugee camp right outside of the hospital and kids were on fire. They were burning. There were people burning alive. So Israel wants to make sure that the U.S. is not going to prevent any aid coming their way. But also, I think the U.S. government is full of it as well, because the U.S. government was never going to stop giving arms to Israel because they want these people gone too. That's what everyone has to understand. So I find the timing to be a little suspicious. And that's how I look at all of this. And I know that the U.S. government, again, they're not going to stop giving Israel the arms. Antony Blinken didn't even want the aid to go in anyway. That's why we reported this a couple of days ago. It was revealed due to leaked documents that he knew that Israel was going to stop aid from getting into Gaza. So he's been lying all this time via press conferences. I also showed you a previous version of Joe Biden's website and his message about Palestine and Israel, where he blamed BDS, where he blamed the Palestinian people for their bad choices. Apparently that rhetoric was so bad that he had to scrub that and insert different language. So what we do know is this. We do know that the Biden administration has always been pro-Israel, but we also know, because of the website information that I showed you, is that the Biden administration from day one never really cared about the Palestinian people or a two-state solution. And as much as they tell you that, well, Israel shouldn't take the land in the West Bank, they have never implemented any actions to stop them from doing that, which they could. So it's just all rhetoric, all rhetoric. So we'll see a little bit here as well. I want to go to this article here. I want to show you here, because I want you to see a little bit about Sinwar. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar killed in Gaza, Israel says. Again, Sinwar was born in a refugee camp and spent years in an Israeli prison before rising to the top of the Iran-backed militant group. Now let's focus on militant group. You know who else was called a militant group? The Black Panthers were called a militant group. Socialists have been called militant groups. Communists have been called militant groups. Black revolutionary leaders have been called militant groups. So I don't want you, when you see that phrase, I don't want you to assume that that's true. Because the reality is, who has the majority of the weapons? Israel does. Who is occupying and oppressing people in Gaza? That is Israel. Who has been in power? That is Israel. So I would argue that Israel is the militant group. Now it goes on to say here, I just want to read a little bit of this. It said, what we know. It says Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, the architect of the October 7th terror attacks, was killed by Israeli forces in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced. Now listen to this. In an address today, Vice President Harris said Sinwar's death gives us an opportunity to finally end the war in Gaza. So does everybody see what's happening here? It all just seems to line up just perfectly right before Election Day. Now Kamala Harris says this gives us the opportunity to end the war. But according to your rhetoric, Kamala, you said you guys were working tirelessly around the clock for a ceasefire. And I disagree. Benjamin Netanyahu, like I told you, his statement was that he is not done with this war. And I would argue that now that Israel has killed another leader of Hamas, that Iran is probably going to respond. So I don't think that this is over. Kamala Harris is hoping that this will be the key to end the war because it'll be good for her. Because then she doesn't have to say, oh, yeah, we should have a two-state solution. She doesn't have to sit up there and make fake promises to Muslim voters in the U.S. And so if you're one of those people and you're kind of on the fence, and some progressives still are on the fence about whether or not they're going to support Kamala or support third party, and because of the genocide in Gaza, if you're on the fence about that, don't fall for this. Don't fall for this. I always question timing, and it seems really weird to me that all of these things just happened to line up. It's October 17th. Everything just happened to line up this close to Election Day. Now we have to wait and see if Iran is going to respond. And if Iran responds, guys, this is not going to be good. And I don't think people understand. This is not a game. A war with Iran is not a game. And if people are not familiar with the weapons that Iran has, like, do you want to go to war with Iran? Because I don't want to go to war with Iran. So yes, we would be looking at a possible World War III, because if Israel goes to war with Iran, then I'm pretty sure Russia would probably get involved as well. This is real life. This is not a movie. And while people are focused on other things that are really not important, everybody in this country should be concerned about the possibility of World War III or a nuclear war. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. All right. Thank you, Hussein. Black lady told me I was racist since I will not vote for Harris. I really hope she loses. Genocide should not be rewarded. I dropped my therapist for saying it ain't a big deal. She's Black/Dominican. Interesting. It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. People are just so willing to just go along with vibes, and, oh, this person is a person of color. Let's just go along with them. Shout out to my comrade JB. Sabby, I just learned from my Muslim comrade that Yahya means John in Arabic. It's sad when a resistance fighter is martyred. Yeah. Thank you, Hussein. I am over Arabs being treated as other, annoying. I've been crying on and off about this situation for a year, and people shrug it off like it ain't a big deal. It makes me wonder why I live in the US. Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly, I'm not surprised though, because again, like I said, there's a lot of distractions. A lot of people are distracted about other things. Like the media runs the news cycle, the corporate media does. And so if corporate media is focusing your attention on, we could have the first Black woman president, a lot more people are going to pay attention to that instead of what's happening when it comes to foreign policy. And that's sad and that's unfortunate, but a lot of people are falling for it. Shout out to Larry Brown for becoming a new member. Give Larry Brown a big whoop, whoop. Yeah. Larry in the house. Thank you for this as well, Hussein. R.I.P. Yahya Sinwar. He showed the whole world Israel behind. R.I.P. to all the kids killed by Kamala and Genocide Joe. Free Palestine and Lebanon. Thank you, David. The modern world's troubles comes from U.S. interventionism. We're the baddies. Also love the new setup, Sabby. Hope you had a drink after Shiva. I still need to have my drink, huh? Thank you, Jay. Hi, Sabby. Sorry I missed Tuesday's stream, but I just wanted to say I'm digging your new setup. Could there be a neon Sabby Sab sign in the background in the future? You know what, Jay? You giving me ideas. Ah, damn. That's a good idea, Jay. I never thought about that. I guess I would have to get someone to make that. I got that sign back there off of Temu. Temu. You guys have probably seen the ads. Thank you, Kinman, Dr. Shiva, Sagar, I am your father. Oh, man, you guys got jokes. Everybody got jokes tonight, dog. Let's get the comment on Rumble, Eric. Thank you. Oh, man. Thank you, Mark Pugsley says, Sabby. Hello, Mark. Oh, man. One more here. Tim, Sabby, where's your 100K YouTube plaque, Sabby? It's over there. Do you think I should put it over here? If you think I should put it over here, I could. I don't know where I would put it. I don't know. You guys giving me all kind of ideas. I could put it over here somewhere. It's silver and it has a mirror in the middle. So the only thing about it is I will say because that mirror is in the middle, like you're going to see whatever, there probably is going to be a reflection of whatever is like right over here. But I don't know. I'll figure it out. I will figure it out. But thanks for the suggestions, guys. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, everyone's saying yeah. Okay, Miss Pamela says yes, put it over there. Okay, I could do that. I'll figure it out. I'll play around for something. Devotion Orange says next to tacos for life. Yeah, so the chalkboard that I got behind me, guys, I told you, like, when I stream, I'm going to put a different message up there. And you guys know how I feel about tacos because I'm keep it real. I can have taco any day, every day. I never get tired of taco, ever. Chicken taco, you know, can have a taco with mahi taco, ground beef taco, carnitas tacos, soft tacos, hard shell tacos, corn tacos. Like listen, there's so many different type of tacos you could have in your life. And that's why I would never get tired of tacos ever. Yeah, shrimp tacos. Let's do the damn thing. I don't know about the vegetarian tacos. I never had a tofu taco, but I have had different types of tacos. I don't know. Bubba Taco Savati. I'm telling you, man, it's a fact. Oh no. Mike Lewis said chitlin tacos. You know what, Mike? You might be giving somebody an idea. You better stop. You better stop. Watch, somebody will see that and be like, you know what? I'm going to try that out. All right, guys. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you very much. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Thank you. Tacos. See, it's already happening. Click Clang says chitlin tacos sound good. See, you already started something. I tell you. All righty. No, bathtub green tacos. I love my audience. You guys have such a great sense of humor. Everybody feeling the love. Okay, let's get to our next story, ladies and gentlemen. So one of you sent me this video of Mehdi Hasan talking about what you should do for the 2024 presidential election. He talks about being a Muslim and, of course, the genocide in Gaza. I want to get into this clip here because what I noticed is that Mehdi Hasan, of course, has been, advocating for Kamala Harris and telling people about the danger of a Donald Trump presidency. And at the same time, of course, trying to roast and shame third party candidates and how they're going to ruin things and just give it all to Donald Trump, etc. But in this video, particularly in the beginning, he starts to tell you how he's not going to tell you who to vote for, except he kind of tells you who to vote for. So let's go ahead and get into this clip here from Mehdi Hasan, and shout out to the viewer who sent me this. And I am going to show you why Mehdi has the rhetoric that he has. We're going to get into some funding info. Let's dive in here.
As a Muslim and as an American, this past year has been an absolute nightmare, watching a horrific and heartbreaking genocide unfold in front of our eyes in Gaza in an election year, armed, funded, and enabled by our country, the United States. An election year in which the choice is between two effectively pro-genocide candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And yes, Jill Stein is in the race too for the Greens, but look, she can't win and won't win, as our own people now admit.
Let's pause here for a second. So do you notice what he just said? He just told you we have two pro-genocide candidates. He didn't say we have two pro-Israel candidates. I don't know if everybody caught this. He said we have two pro-genocide candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. So Mehdi is telling you that both of those candidates are pro-genocide, not pro-Israel, pro-genocide. That's important when you listen to the rest of his message. A
lot of Muslim voters, though, the only thing that matters is punishing the Democrats who are in power right now. And I understand that. I get it. I feel it too. I also want to politically punish them. What they've done on Gaza and now Lebanon is immoral, illegal, outrageous, as I have been saying for 12 straight months. I am, though, uncomfortable watching some Muslims weaponize our faith and our sense of community to try and score political points. to badger people into voting against Harris, no matter who or what comes next. In recent
Pause. So did you notice what he just did? So he told you he's not happy about Muslim voters trying to badger other Muslim voters to not support Kamala Harris, to vote against Kamala Harris. But at the very beginning of this video essay, he told you himself that we have two pro-genocide candidates. But he has a problem with people telling you not to vote for a genocide candidate. Okay, we all together? We all together now. Let's go back in. Aye.
days, I've seen some foreign analysts and influencers like Sami Hamdi suggest it is your obligation as a Muslim to vote against Harris, even if it means a Trump victory. I've seen a big group of American imams, many of whom I respect, writing an open letter quoting the Quran and urging Muslim Americans to abandon Harris. Now, in my view, there are three big problems with this line of argument, and I hope you can hear me out in good faith, even if you don't necessarily agree with me. And to be clear, by the way, because there is a lot of misinformation going around, I'm not here to tell you to vote for Harris. No, I'm not going to tell you how to vote. But I do want to explain to you what I think is at stake.
I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but I do want to explain to you what is at stake. So do you see this little sneaky thing that Mehdi Hasan does here? Okay.
What you need to be thinking about as you cast your vote, and why it's a little more complicated than some folks on the internet might have you believe.
Folks on the
Number
internet.
one, the increasing use of Islam, of religion, of faith, of invoking the Quran to try and get people to vote the right way, almost emotionally blackmailing them into not voting for the Democrats, and the accompanying insinuation that you're not a good Muslim, or not even a Muslim at all, if you decide to vote for the candidate who you think is the lesser of two evils. That line of thinking, that line of argument really bothers me.
Does it bother you when the Democratic Party does that too, Mehdi Hasan? Does it bother Mehdi Hasan when the Democratic Party tries to bully voters into supporting the candidate that they selected? Does it bother you, Mehdi, when the Democratic Party and Democrat leaders try to bully progressive Democrats and socialists and Marxists into supporting the Democrat candidate that they selected? Oh, no. It only bothers you when it is people that are not a part of the Democratic Party or people who are not willing to support that Democrat candidate tell you not to support the administration that aided and funded the genocide. So we're not even halfway through the clip yet, and you can already see some of the inconsistencies here, because the reality is this. If you have a problem with people trying to bully you into not supporting Kamala Harris, because as he said at the beginning, she's pro-genocide. He said that. But you don't have a problem with Democrat strategists, Democrat leaders, and Kamala Harris supporters bullying progressive, anti-Zionist, anti-genocide voters into supporting Kamala Harris. What I miss? Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going on.
Green Party's vice presidential candidate, Butch Ware, who is a Muslim, recently referred to other Muslims who support Kamala Harris as Muslims, in quote marks, as if they're not real Muslims, as if they're fake Muslims. That is a very dangerous road to go down. You're the Green Party, you're not ISIS. You shouldn't be takfiring fellow Muslims.
So, do you have a problem with that, Mehdi, when the Democratic Party did the same thing to progressives? Let's go back to Bernie Sanders 2020 and 2016. Didn't Democrat leaders and Democrat strategists bully and shame progressive voters into supporting Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, and that if they didn't, that they would give them Donald Trump? And didn't they say the same thing about progressives, like, you're not a good Democrat if you don't go with this? Look, even Bernie Sanders is putting his energy behind Hillary Clinton and behind Joe Biden, so you got to do the same thing too? No, doesn't have a problem with that.
Especially over a secular, domestic political disagreement. You don't know what's in another person's heart, what moral calculations they've made about how best to use their vote, given what's at stake in this election. Who are you to judge another person's faith? Number two, this idea that if Muslim voters deliver a defeat to the Democrats come November, the Democrats will then be forced to take the Muslim vote seriously, and Muslim Americans will have a newfound political power here in the United States. I heard that everywhere. Now, I don't want to sound patronizing here, but it is a little naive and simplistic to think US politics works in this way. I'm sorry, it doesn't. I wish it did. And I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but trust me, it's not how the US political system works. I mean, do you really think that, let's say, Muslim Americans cause Kamala Harris to lose Michigan and lose the presidential election in November, that on the morning after the election, Democrats will wake up and say, wow, if only we'd been more pro-Muslim. Well, we've learned our lesson. Now we're going to listen to Muslims on Palestine and on foreign policy. No, of course.
Okay, let's interject here for just a second. So one thing that I do want to add that I will say with this particular talking point is that the Democratic Party will find a way to adapt. What do I mean by that? The Israel one is a tough one for them because they do take money from AIPAC. They do take money from the Israeli lobby. So unless they're willing to shut down that type of big money interest, most likely they're just going to try to move on to recruit another group of people. What could that look like? So if the Democratic Party, if Kamala loses Michigan, like Mehdi is saying, the Democratic Party is probably more likely to try to recruit another demographic. Now, that could mean white women. That could mean they don't do as well with white men. So they're probably going to lean on white women. Sorry, white women, but they're probably going to lean on you. They're probably going to go to you. I'm just saying. So they'll probably go towards white women. However, I want to push back on this as well a little bit, because in 2016, when Hillary Clinton lost, and although Hillary blamed Jill Stein and she blamed Bernie, which was weird because Bernie did help her campaign after they cheated him in the primary, which is crazy because if you cheat me, I'm not helping you, boo. But he did help her campaign. And then also on top of that, there was a good amount of those Bernie supporters that did support Hillary Clinton in 2016. Let's just keep it real. Not all of them, but there were a good amount that did. But however, what the numbers did show is that when it came to Black men and Black women, she did not perform as well as Barack Obama did. And that's just reality number wise. There were some people that voted for Barack Obama because they're like, oh, we want Black president. And then there were some that voted for him because just based on policy. But some were just like, he's Black president. We want him to be Black president, that kind of thing. Obama was also very charismatic. So what did the Democratic Party do come 2020 to try to make up for that? Joe Biden went out to Black communities more heavily than Hillary Clinton did. So in some instances, they will try to make some type of adjustments to try to win over that group back, especially if they realize they cannot win without that group. This is why Joe Biden was able to get more voters, more Black voters than Hillary Clinton did. They made some significant adjustments. Remember, Joe Biden got the endorsement from Jim Clyburn. That was a big thing. He went to the fish fry. He was going to Black churches. And it's really crazy, too, because even after he told Charlamagne the God, if you got to figure out if you're going to vote for me or Donald Trump, then you're not Black. Like, Black people still came out and supported him more than they supported Hillary Clinton. It was really bizarre. But needless to say, they made some type of adjustments there to try to, okay, Hillary didn't do as well with Black voters as Barack Obama did. What can we do to fix that with Joe Biden? And Clyburn was a big piece for that. He was a big piece to help Joe Biden get the Black vote. Now you have Kamala Harris, and she is performing lower than Biden with Black voters, which is crazy because, like I said, something went wrong there, right? Because Biden did make that effort to try to go out and get more Black voters, going to Black communities and Black churches when he was campaigning to try to get that support. And of course, that big endorsement from Clyburn also helped him out a lot as well. So I would argue that depending on the demographic, they will try to make some type of change to get that group back. But also, he does have a point that they could just move on to somebody else. And I think this is also the reason why the Democratic Party has been leaning in so heavily for the overturn of Roe v. Wade, because that is more likely to help them with the female population, but it's going to help them more, I think, with white women than with black women. Because like I told you guys this before, when it comes to Roe v. Wade and stuff like that, and a woman's right to choose and all the marches that happen in the streets for women's rights, you saw more white women than you did black women. So I get what he's saying a little bit here, but they have done this before in the past where they did try to make some switcheroos or make more appearances in the black community when it came time for Joe Biden when he was in that race. So just keep that in mind.
It's not. What they'll do is say, good luck to you, Muslims. You helped Trump win. Now you're on your own surviving under him. You'll have one party, the Republican Party, that already hates us, and another party now that hates us too. Now, you may not care about that, fine. But I'm not sure how that gives us any political power or leverage.
So pause for a second. So do you see what he's doing here? So he just admitted to you that the Republican Party hates Muslims, and he's saying the Democratic Party hates Muslims too. But he still wants you to support a party that hates you. So first he said, let's nail this, guys. First he said you have Kamala Harris and Donald Trump who are both pro-genocide. Now he's also telling you that both parties hate you. Okay, okie dokie. We've heard it all now.
In this country. By the way, if you think I'm making this up, just go back to 2016 and Hillary Clinton's defeat. The Democrats didn't wake up then and say, damn it, we should have listened to Bernie Sanders and been more left-wing. No, they vilified the Bernie wing of the party, blamed them for Trump, and then nominated Biden, not Bernie, 4 years later. The left.
But they did say we need to do better with black voters. And that was something. So he's focusing on the Bernie progressive part. No, they didn't say, no, we need to be more progressive per se. However, notice that some of those Democrat primary candidates that were in the race in 2020 did try to adopt some of Bernie's messaging. Remember, Kamala Harris was for Medicare for all during the Dem primaries. Then when she got the pushback from corporate media, then she was like, oh, no. You know, then she wavered. She's not really for anything. She just go with whatever she thinks is going to help her win. So remember that. Remember, Elizabeth Warren was try to adapt to that as well. And then I think Pete Buttigieg at one point also said it and then tried to backtrack off of it or whatever. So they did try to change their messaging a little bit to attract that progressive base. They didn't lean all the way over there. But what he's leaving out is what they did to get the black vote. So that part is important.
Didn't get special leverage. Go back even further to 2000, when a clear majority of Muslim Americans decided to punish the Democrats and vote en masse for George W. Bush. Did that make the Democrats become pro-Muslim? No. Did that stop George Bush from invading Iraq and killing 500,000 Muslim Iraqis? No. But number three, the biggest issue I have is with the minimization of the danger posed by Donald Trump. This suggestion that if Muslims abandon Harris and if Trump wins, it won't be so bad because, you know, Trump's not that bad. Personally, I find it rather shocking, offensive even, to see people rewriting the history on Trump, the history of just 4 years ago. We've become like goldfish, no memory of anything that happened more than a week ago, it seems. This analyst, Sami Hamdi, said in a recent viral video that, and I quote, "You survived 4 years of Trump, you can survive again." Well, no, we didn't survive 4 years of Trump. Stop saying this. It's just not true. 450,000 Americans died from COVID on Trump's incompetent watch while he was telling us to inject disinfectant into our arms. And according to one study, 40% of those deaths were preventable. So 180,000 Americans would be alive today were it not for Trump.
Now you're talking about two different things. So you see what he's trying to do? He's bringing up the pandemic and things like that. And I didn't agree with the way that Trump handled that. But I think this particular group, and I've interviewed probably a number of Muslim voters on this show, and I've spoken to a number in person. I don't think that is what they are focused on at this point in time. I don't think they're focusing on pandemic. I think Again, some people are one issue voters. And what has been very clear to me is the genocide. And that is what they are focusing on. Just like some people, their one issue is abortion, or their one issue is, was the pandemic. For some of the Muslim voters, their one issue is the genocide in Gaza. So I think with Mehdi, you see, again, he's telling you he's not going to tell you who to vote for, but he's trying to make the case against Donald Trump, thus essentially telling you who to vote for, because he already told you in the beginning, well, third party's not going to win, so let's just put that to the side. I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for, but let me tell you why Trump is so bad. So he's still telling you who to vote for. So does everybody see the game that Mehdi Hasan plays?
25,000 Americans might also be alive today if Trump hadn't made it so hard for them to access health care. Well, that's Americans, you might say. At least he didn't do a genocide in the Middle East.
You want to talk about accessing healthcare? Remember, there was a whole movement to force the vote for Medicare for all in exchange for Nancy Pelosi's speakership. You want to talk about healthcare, and the so-called progressives in Congress were not willing to force the vote for Medicare for all. So since you bring up healthcare, let's talk about that.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. In Yemen, where he helped MBS kill tens of thousands of Yemenis over 4 years. 2018, in fact, was the most violent year in the history of the Yemen civil war. 30,000 deaths on Trump's watch. Not to mention all the drone strikes he did. More than Obama and more than Biden. So if the argument is you're stepping over the corpses of Palestinians if you vote for the Dems, then aren't you also stepping over the corpses of Yemenis by allowing Trump to win again?
So the case that you're making for me, Mehdi, the case that he's making for me is that both parties are warmongers and you shouldn't support either one of them. That's the case that you're making for me. Wait till we get to the comment section of this video, because the comments are not in favor of what he's saying. So he's talking about Sammy. I showed you guys the video. He was a guest on the podcast, The Thinking Muslim, and Sammy was saying that to him, how much more worse could it be under Donald Trump, and that you are stepping on the courses of, the dead Palestinians, etc. And Sammy's argument in that video was that if we can get Jill Stein to the 5%, you effectively break the duopoly. So don't get it twisted. Mehdi Hasan here is here to do the work of the Democratic Party. And no, he may not be working with MSNBC anymore, but he's still there to protect that status quo. After this clip, I'm going to show you another clip from Jen Perlman's podcast where they explain to you why they think that is. And Jen Perlman's a Democrat. Her and Peter are Democrats, but even they are calling out what Mehdi Hasan is doing. Even they understand that, no, you should not want to support Kamala Harris or this Biden administration because of the genocide. So if they can understand that and they're Democrats, why is it that Mehdi Hasan, who is no longer employed with MSNBC and supposedly has his own independent show, why is it that he can't understand that? Could it have something to do with the money?
Future corpses of Iranians who Trump is now openly threatening to support the bombing and killing of? Or even more Palestinian corpses, with Jared Kushner telling Israel to finish the job in Gaza? Kamala
wants the Iranians killed too. Kamala wants this. This is the thing. Neither one of them like Iran.
Is that the game we really want to play with Muslim lives? And look, to use dead Muslims as a cudgel, as a stick in this way, to bully and blackmail people into voting for what you want, is not just distasteful.
Who's blackmailing people? What are you talking about? Who's blackmailing people? And right now, Mehdi Hasan, you have done the same thing. When Jill Stein came onto his show, weren't you trying to bully Jill Stein into not being in this race because, you're just going to risk Donald Trump? Weren't you trying to bully Jill Stein? Aren't you trying to bully people who don't want to support Kamala Harris into supporting Kamala Harris because Donald Trump is so much more scary or worse to you? Aren't you doing the same damn thing? What Sammy said on that podcast, The Thinking Muslim, I thought was a great interview, and I recommend everyone check out that podcast, The Thinking Muslim.
It's awful. And it's also nonsensical. Most Muslim Americans already voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Did anyone say at the time that they would have to answer on the day of judgment to the hundreds and thousands of Iraqis that Joe Biden helped kill by pushing for the Iraq war back in 2003? No. Most Muslim Americans understood back in 2020 that stopping Trump was more important than punishing Biden for Iraq.
There wasn't a genocide in Gaza at that point in time. There wasn't a genocide in Gaza at that point in time. And that should tell you something, Mehdi. The fact that people were willing, Muslim voters were willing to come together and organize and support Biden back then, but now they're not willing to. You just answered your own question.
That frustratingly, tragically, pretty much every president of the United States kills Muslims, kills people abroad. There are no good, clean, or pure options. Sorry. So look.
Pause. So number one, that's misleading. There are good, clean options. You can vote for Jill Stein. You can vote for Claudia De La Cruz. You can vote for Dr. Cornel West. There are other options that you can vote for. So he's lying to his audience when he says there are no good, clean options. There are good, clean options. Also, I would feel like some kind of punk sellout if I sat up there and I told my people, well, look, none of the presidents like us, but you need to support one of them. Hell to the no. What if the Black Panthers said that? They don't like us. They don't want to help us, but we got to support them anyways. No, they decided to build their own communities, their own clinics, the free breakfast program, helping and doing mutual aid because they knew this government wasn't shit. What if the civil rights activists said that? Well, it doesn't matter who's president. They still hate us. We got the Jim Crow laws down south. This just is what it is. So we just got to keep things the way that they are. That's the law. I would probably still be sitting in the back of the bus. You see, that's the problem. And I get it that Mehdi Hasan is not an activist. I get that. But that type of thinking is what holds marginalized people back. There's always one. There's always one marginalized person, this part of the group that's there to try to tell you why you should not do what you want to do to get some type of progress. Now, some people like to refer to them as ops. Some people also refer to them as sellouts or Uncle Toms or Sambos, like that type of thing. Because the reality is Mehdi Hasan is holding his people back. And whether or not you believe the Democratic Party would move differently if they lose the Muslim vote or not, it damn sure sends a message in the corporate media and it sends a message to Americans in this country. And it lets people know that they were not going to put up with this. It sends a message, a strong one, I might add. Just like when civil rights activists marched through the streets, when they had boycotts and sit-ins, and police were dragging them and kicking them and hitting them and sicking dogs on them, and they didn't stop fighting. Imagine if those activists, and not everybody stuck with it the whole way, but imagine if those activists said, you know what? They hate us. We're Black. They hate us. This is just how it is. We just got to let it be how it is. Imagine if they said that. So I'm not asking Mehdi Hasan to be an activist, but what I am asking Mehdi Hasan to do is to stop holding his people back. There's always that one. There's always that one that will come forward and try to hold the people back. And it makes you wonder what was offered to Mehdi Hasan. Get to that. We will get to that.
Whether or not you vote for Harris, that's up to you. It isn't an easy choice, but it is a choice. Let's not lie to ourselves about this. It isn't happening in a vacuum. And the alternative to Kamala Harris come Inauguration Day 2025 will be Donald Trump, not Jill Stein. The same Donald Trump who Netanyahu and Ben Gvir want as president. They don't want Harris.
So first of all, this is another thing he's trying to do. So he's trying to fearmonger people and say, Donald Trump is going to kill even more of us. Motherfucker, have you looked at Gaza? Gaza is pretty much flattened. And now they're killing people in Lebanon. And now they want a war with Iran. So what are you talking about? Seriously, what are you talking about? I know they killed our people, but we got to support them anyway because, Benjamin Netanyahu wants Donald Trump. Don't get it twisted, folks. Don't get it twisted. As much as Democrat politicians will say, well, Benjamin Netanyahu is, a far right extreme government, they have no problem giving bombs to that far right extreme government. They have no problem giving money to that far right extreme government. That far right extreme government has health care for everyone and free college. And you don't even have that here. So don't get it twisted. Just because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden will say, oh, well, Netanyahu, he's far right, the Likud party is right and extreme. They have no problem giving them the tools that they ask for to continue a genocide. So even though Netanyahu may say, I prefer Donald Trump, don't get it twisted. Kamala gonna give him weapons too. She already told you so. Woo!
A lot of Muslims don't want to give Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir what they want, and so they may hold their noses and vote for Harris. That doesn't make them bad Muslims or pro-genocide. And so it does annoy me that some in my community, the Muslim American community, want us to pretend that this is an easy choice, that you just abandon Harris to support Gaza, that you have clean hands, and that you then have no moral responsibility for the pro-genocide, pro-Netanyahu, anti-Muslim, racist, unhinged Trump who comes next, because that...
Pause. So didn't he tell you earlier in the video that you have two candidates that are pro-genocide, Kamala and Donald Trump? Now he's going to tell you that you can't sit up there and tell Muslim voters that if you support Kamala Harris, then you're pro-genocide. You just told us that she was pro-genocide. Hello? So is anybody home? Because that makes no sense. And it's interesting, obviously, somebody sent Mehdi Hasan out to make this message. Somebody got into Mehdi's ear, or somebody said some things to Mehdi that said, how dare you? So he feel like he got to put out this PSA.
Is who comes next, whether you like it or not. And so the reality is that no matter who you vote for, or whether or not you vote at all, your hands aren't going to be clean. Again, sorry. Now, sure, some people online may tell you what you want to hear. They may go viral by making things sound simple and easy, or moral and Islamic to you. My job isn't to do that. My job is to tell you the truth, no matter how inconvenient, awkward, or unpopular.
The truth? What does the Quran say? Because he said people were quoting scripture. What does the Quran say? And I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm not Muslim, guys. Y'all let me know. But what does the Quran say about this type of situation? Look at the comments. One of Sammy's points was that gaining political influence is a long-term process. He posed the question of how many times the Democratic Party would risk losing elections because of the Muslim population. Sammy emphasized that it could take multiple elections to see a shift. Is genocide not enough to reconsider voting and standing with the Democrats? It feels like we're offering unconditional support. Here's another one. I'm a Muslim and I'm voting for Jill Stein. Genocide is a red line for me and should be punished, period. Here's another one. Palestine issue is a human rights issue, not a religious issue. Ooh, that's a good one. That is a good one. Here's another one. Salam, Mehdi. I think it is high time you invite either the respectable Muhammad Jalal or the renowned Sammy Hamdi to your show and podcast. Time is ticking. Elections are near. Here's another one. I have a hypothetical question for Mehdi. If a candidate promised to give you everything that you wanted, politically that is, but in exchange, he demanded to kill your children, would you vote for that candidate? Maybe that calculus does not enter into your thinking because it is not your children that are being killed, but the children in Palestine who are being killed are somebody's children. If you look at the comments, they are not agreeing with him. They're not. Now let's get to the money. Now, Jen Perlman, and this is her co-host Peter. Now, Jen ran against Debbie Weiserman Schultz, and they called him out. And like I said, they're Democrats. And they said Jill Stein calls out Mehdi Hasan for smearing Butch Ware and Shama Sawant. But this is the part of the segment I want you to hear. Again, they are Democrats. Listen to what they say.
Quit MSNBC is now doing his own thing. Doesn't that show principle?
Yes, to some extent.
It does. But here's a little secret that, and I'm not going to say who the person is, but let's just say that one of Jen's max donors when she ran against Wasserman Schultz is one of Mehdi Hasan's biggest benefactors. And who's to say that that person is not adjacent to the Democratic Party establishment? And
everybody heard that? Everybody heard that.
Once you get to that level of money, when we're talking somebody who could write $1 million check and say, here's your new media company, that is who you answer to. Now, Mehdi personally probably doesn't care very much for Kamala Harris.
No, but it doesn't matter.
But career-wise, he chooses to, because your career is what gets dangled over your head. This is why we have been lauding Tim Black for the longest time.
And I get that. I get that what Mehdi is like. I get that. But then don't be disingenuous. You don't get to say that you're taking the high road on the issue of genocide, but then turn around and simp for the Democratic Party. Again, those are mutually exclusive things. You don't get to do that. You don't get to support Kamala Harris and then pretend that you're not taking a stand on what's happening in Palestine.
There it is. So, and everybody sees it because Mehdi was, one of the more vocal corporate media hosts at that point in time before he left MSNBC that was honest about what was happening in Gaza and did want, to hold Israel advisors that came onto his show accountable and did call them out on their lies. But what Jen Perlman said there is right. And listen, and me and Jen, we've had, our beef before in the past, but what she said there is correct. So you see what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that he even likes Kamala Harris. It's all about playing the game that helps you further your career in media. Now, remember, he started his own thing called Zeteo. Like that's his own media thing now. He's not with MSNBC anymore. And that money came from somewhere. But what do you think? I mean, this is how you can tell. A lot of these people say they're independent. They're not independent. This is independent. Look around. I'm in a room in my house. Mehdi's in a studio. A pretty nice one. He hired people to work with him. Right off the bat, when he started it, he announced, I hired this person, I hired that person. Where'd that money come from? So it doesn't mean he loves Kamala, but he's going to do what he need to do for the Democratic Party so that he can continue to be in the room with the people that he needs to be in the room with to get the funding or whatever he needs for his new venture, his new media venture. And that's what it is. And now you're willing to sit up there and tell your people, no, don't fight. Don't da-da-da. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, he said, but he's telling you who to vote for. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, 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 ay. All right, guys, smash that like button. Bam. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. What up? Okay. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Tamed Chaos. I understand that Trump may be pro-Israel, but I think he's more anti-war than he is pro-Israel from a U.S. interest perspective. I don't want World War III. Been there. Iraq via Marine Corps. Good work. Thank you. He's made some comments about, just go in there and just finish them, like that kind of thing, similar to Nikki Haley. He's made comments like that when it comes to the Middle East. Shout out to Andre, says, hey, Sabby, keep striving for greatness. What's up, Andre? Greetings, Samad, says, mediocre sauce Zaki drifters a year into G-side. Grifters, you said. Grifters. You said not Nazi grifters. Thank you for that. And thank you for this. How much does Zeteo get from the DNC? I don't know. It doesn't even have to be from the DNC. You know, sometimes it can be an investor that is heavily, you know, invested in the Democratic Party. Thank you, Sam. Mehdi Hasan is a snake. Rifat Al-Arir had this man pegged. Norm Finkelstein correctly called him a rat. He is the guy who wanted to work for a right-wing publication where he said he would attack the left from the left. And there you go, guys. When opportunity knocks, damn. Thank you, David. Mehdi represents the core problem with the late stage capitalist society. He's willing to pretzel his principles to support his own people's slaughter. Thank you, Cool Blue. Democratic Party does psychological warfare. Yeah, I can see that. There's a buzzing sound. I don't know where it came from. Let's see if I mute. What happens? Oh, it's not me. It's probably one of these lights. Thank you, Vac Stories. Candace Owens breaking. Kamala's grandma was Irish, 0% black. So claiming to be black for political reasons. Yeah, I can't confirm that. But thank you. Thanks, Cool Blue. Election 2024 likely to flip presidency from D to R. Next election that flips from D to R, D pickup winner shifts whites even as blacks trend Republican. Yeah, we're going to get into that when we get to the Trump story. Because there is something I want to forewarn people about. But that's interesting. Eric, can we leave that super chat there? Because I might have to come back to that later. Thank you, New York Varsity. Reminder, just because someone is on the right side of history with Gaza doesn't mean they're on the right about everything else. Collapsible vertebrae. This is a good point. Thank you, David. Mehdi to Muslims equal Obama to black men. Damn. No, you didn't. No. Thank you, Purple Philosophy. Kamala, Republicans in the cabinet and Greens in the bathtub. Republicans in the cabinet and Greens in the bathtub. Oh my God, you guys are cracking me up tonight. Thank you for the super sticker, Frank. And shout out to Blueser, who just gifted 50 Sabby memberships. Give Blueser a big whoop whoop to those of you that gain those. And thank you, Cool Blue. Mehdi Hasan and everyone else of his ilk should have the Democratic Party logo at the bottom right-hand corner of the video screens. Thank you, Baron. Remember Dems were saying when Trump sees he's losing the election, he'll start the war with Iran? Oh, I forgot about that. Thank you, Nas. Islam says you're telling me, okay. Islam says it is every Muslim's duty to fight off oppressors and invaders. Imagine if all Muslim countries unite against them. So that's what it says all right, gotcha. Thank you, Sparky. Love you, Sabby. By the way, thanks for exposing the real Dr. Shiva. Oh my God, that was nutso, right? For the record, I do want to add something here for those who are not aware. I didn't invite him on. His assistant reached out to me and asked if he could come on. So just FYI. Thank you, Kenman. Dr. Shiva was married to Fran Drescher. Yeah, isn't Fran Drescher like a Zionist? Thank you, Alcas. Mehdi is like the uncommitted movement. There you go. There it is. Let's get the comment on Rumble. Thank you, We Bengal. Somebody sent something into Mehdi's back account. Do you mean bank account? Okay, I think you mean bank account. But thank you so much for that. All right, let's go ahead and get into our next story, ladies and gentlemen, because this is a perfect time to segue into the third party story. So MSNBC has been hard at work trying to explain to voters why they should not support third party candidates. And I don't mean just like a segment here or there. I mean multiple segments back to back, even so much they went into the history of third parties. So that's where we're going to start with Ali Veshi show. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. So they go back into the Ross Perot days, trying to warn folks, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into it.
All right, just over 3 weeks until Election Day, voter registration is underway across the country. In fact, it's actually already closed in about half of states. By the way, check your state's registration deadline. Early voting has begun in a handful of states. Mail-in ballots are being sent out. All of this is to say the election is, in fact, underway. If you're a voter in Virginia, for example, you will receive a ballot that looks something like this. The choices before you will include Kamala Harris and his running mate Tim Walz, Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance, and 4 other candidates, including Jill Stein, Cornel West, names you might not be as familiar with. So let's talk for a moment about these third-party options. The majority of Americans right now are dissatisfied with a two-party system. They want other party options. But historically, third-party presidential candidates have never been that successful in America. Let's look to history to understand. In 1992, Texas billionaire Ross Perot ran for president as an independent against Republican George H.W. Bush and Democrat Bill Clinton. Perot ran on a platform focused on economic reform and reducing the national debt, as well as political and congressional reform, and in opposition to the trade deal NAFTA. He ran a real serious national campaign. At one point, he was the leading candidate in a major national poll. He participated in all 3 national debates on stage with Clinton and Bush. He ran ads, he made speeches, and in the end, he won nearly 19 million votes. That's nearly 19% of the popular vote overall. That's a big deal. Ross Perot made the strongest third-party run since 1912, and he still didn't win one single electoral vote.
Let me pause here for a second. So Ross Perot was a billionaire too, you guys. Billionaire, 19%, George H.W. Bush, 38%, and Bill Clinton, 43%. Now, Ross Perot was able to be on the debate stage too, right? Now, I think Ross Perot was like an amazing independent candidate? No, not really. I mean, but there were a number of people that did support Ross Perot. Now, he's saying he didn't win an electoral vote. He's correct. He didn't. But again, I don't think he was a phenomenal change candidate. Imagine if it was a phenomenal change candidate. So that's what we got to think about, right? And I want to give you also a little bit of history. A lot of people don't talk about this, but the Republican Party was a third party. Once upon a time, the Republican Party was a third party. Think about that. Let's go back in.
Of course, Clinton ended up winning the election. He won the popular vote by just under 5 points. He won the electoral vote by a landslide. Many Republicans at the time blamed Perot for Bush's loss, saying he pulled votes away from Bush, though Perot's impact is still up for debate. But now, just weeks until Election Day, the 2024 race is tight and getting tighter, it seems. Lest we forget, President Biden won 4 years ago by winning key swing states by less than 1%. Trump did the same thing in 2016. And this race is shaping up to be just as close in entirely similar fashion. According to a recent Wall Street Journal polling, Trump and Harris are within 2 points of one another in 6 out of 7 swing states. That is well within the margin of error. Nationally, they are tied. This election may be decided by a handful of voters, in some cases by uncommitted and third-party voters.
Pause for a second. Did everybody catch what Ali Velshi just said there? He said that nationally they are tied. That is a change. Remember, they were telling you over and over in the polls that Kamala Harris was ahead of Donald Trump. They said she had that 5-point lead nationally. And what we have seen with Kamala Harris is that she's not moving. Like, it's like she got there, like she had that surge in the polls when she first announced that she was running. And then, Donald Trump continued to creep up in the polls. And then she's actually decreased some. He's decreased some. She decreased some. They went back and forth. And now she's at that period where she's not moving at all, which is what I predicted would happen. That honeymoon period came to an end. And once more people started to hear her and hear from her more, she was going to, not continue that surge. So now Ali Velshi is admitting that they're tied nationally. So just keep that in mind.
No matter your number one issue, no matter your key motivation for voting or not, whether it's reproductive rights or it's climate or a ceasefire deal or economic policy or immigration, no matter your motivation, understand that your voice, your vote is critical, at least this time around, and that there are really only two choices before you.
So you see what they're doing? So does everybody see the narrative now? There are only two choices. You only have two options. Does everybody see? Because Mehdi Hasan did the same thing. You only have two options. Now, he just told you about other people that are going to be running, but he told you only have two options. So everybody got their marching orders, right? So from MSNBC to CNN, etc., they all to Mehdi Hasan, they all got their marching orders. All of these, I'm sorry, guys, the Boston stuff, I don't know what's happening. They all got their marching orders. I told you I started dropping my R's the longer I live here. All of these videos came out back to back, one after each other. Bam, 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 bam. Mehdi Hasan, Ali Velshi. And then we have this one here as well from Case Study QB. Here's another one. So I'm telling you, they're all coming out back to back to back to back because we're getting closer to November.
Of course, Harris and Trump are not the only presidential candidates on the ballot.
No, they're not. Scripps News political director Joe St. George looks at how third-party candidates could take just enough votes to swing the election.
Trump, Harris. Only one, though, could be president of the United States come the end of January. Of course, there are other presidential candidates out there, all running because they believe the country's two-party system doesn't best represent all Americans. Chase Oliver is a Libertarian's presidential nominee. Jill Stein is running for president on behalf of the Green Party. Cornel West is running as an independent. While the polls show no third-party candidate is running a campaign strong enough to seriously challenge Harris or Trump, the candidate...
No, listen to the framing. No third-party candidate is running a campaign that's strong enough to seriously challenge Kamala or Trump. But we're going to tell you why they're a problem and you shouldn't support them. None of these campaigns are running. None of them are serious. Jill Stein is receiving 40% of Muslim voter support in Michigan, more than Kamala and Trump combined, but it's not serious. This is how we got to pay attention to the propaganda. We got to pay attention to the propaganda, guys.
Have been successful in getting on many ballots. Libertarian candidate Chase Oliver is on the ballot in all of these states.
Pause. We're going to go through these one by one. Chase Oliver, so Libertarian candidate, right? Chase Oliver has the most ballot access. But notice you don't hear them really coming after Chase the way they're coming after Jill Stein, right? And that's because typically they say, well, Libertarian candidates, if anything, they're going to get more the right-leaning voters. And, that's not going to hurt Kamala Harris, right? But I don't hear Republicans calling out Chase Oliver. I don't hear Republicans. This is something we got to talk about for a second, okay? Can we talk about for a minute? I don't hear, if you guys notice this, I don't hear Republicans, the Republican Party, I don't hear them calling out the Libertarian presidential candidate. And if we want to go back to 2016, a lot of people like to bring up Jill Stein, but a lot of people leave out Gary Johnson. And from what I remember, based on the data, Gary Johnson had the most successful Libertarian candidate run for president. But I didn't hear Republicans calling out Gary Johnson. Now, granted, Donald Trump won, but still, Donald Trump lost in 2020, and I don't hear Republicans calling out, who was it in 2020 that ran Libertarian? Is it Scott? Somebody knows. Somebody knows his name. I can see his face. I'm sorry. I can see his face. I can't remember his name. Was it Joe Jorgensen? There was another. No, there was another one. Oh, shoot. I forget his name. I'm sorry. It'll come to me. But did people point fingers and blame Joe Jorgensen for the reason why Donald Trump lost? See, this is what I'm talking about. Let's continue. So that's Chase Oliver right there. Why is it like I can see his face, but I can't remember his name? In fact, I listened to this guy. He was speaking at an Assange rally, and I was there and I talked to him. I can't remember his name. Jesus. Thank you. Spike Cohen. Thank you. Yes, Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen. Thank you. That's who it was. Okay, let's continue.
Green Party candidate Jill Stein has made the ballot in most key states too.
Okay, now you can see the ballot access that Jill Stein has here, right? And we remember she was on the ballot in Nevada, and we remember what happened with the Democratic Party, removed them there, gave them the wrong paperwork, yada, yada. It's ridiculous. And Ohio, I believe, is that Ohio? No, that's Indiana. But so she has the second most ballot access.
And while Cornel West is on the fewest ballots, Politico's Brittany Gibson, she covers third-party candidates, says he is still capable of taking votes away from Democrats.
Pause. Let's go back to Cornel West. And sorry to keep stopping so much. It's just I want to make sure I cover this. Because Dr. West, he's running a large write-in campaign. That's how it's described on his website. But look at this. Dr. West, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina. So that's 3 swing states, right? So that's 3 swing states. But notice you don't see them attacking and coming after, Dr. West, the way that they're coming after Jill Stein. And that's because Jill Stein has 40% of the Muslim vote in Michigan. And she's beating Kamala Harris with Muslim voters in, I think it's 2 other swing states as well. So pay attention to that. However, there are people who have told me to my face that they will be voting for Cornel West. So Black voters. So don't be surprised. And that's what she's going to get into here as well.
Gibson, she covers third-party candidates, says he is still capable of taking votes away from Democrats.
He's really galvanized the pro-Palestinian true activist support.
To understand just how consequential a third-party vote can be, look no further than Wisconsin. In 2016, Trump won it by a little more than 20,000 votes. In 2020, he lost it by around the same margin. In 2016, over 100,000 Wisconsin voters cast a ballot for the Libertarian candidate that year, and over 30,000 cast a ballot for Jill Stein.
Pause. I'm so glad that they decided to put up the data. So let's dive into these numbers because this exposes something. Donald Trump won Wisconsin, and the Libertarian Party received over 100,000 votes. Hillary Clinton lost Wisconsin, and the Green Party received 30,000 votes. So is it just me? Because when I'm doing the math in my head, how is it that Donald Trump was still able to win in Wisconsin and the Libertarian Party received more votes than the Green Party? But Hillary Clinton could not win Wisconsin and the Green Party received 30,000 votes. What does that tell you about Hillary Clinton's campaign? What does that tell you? That tells me some people stayed home. But Donald Trump was still able to win, even though the Libertarian candidate received 100,000 votes. That was Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson, again, most successful Libertarian presidential candidate. And he still won. So thank you for putting up that data.
Who ran for president that year, too. The Democratic National Committee is acutely aware of the impact third-party candidates may have this year. Last week, they launched this attack ad against Stein, which is airing in swing states.
Stein was key to Trump's 2016 wins in battleground states.
The biggest third-party question mark may involve someone who is no longer running for president, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He endorsed Trump weeks ago, but is still on the ballot in all of these states,
Pause. I'm glad they brought this up because people are being kind of quiet about this. Ladies and gentlemen, even though RFK Jr. sort of suspended his campaign, he was not allowed to remove himself off the ballot in certain swing states. There are people who have said publicly that they're still going to vote for RFK Jr. And this could be the one that got away. This could be the one that people are just not paying as much attention to because let's look at the map. He's still on the ballot in Wisconsin, Michigan, Wisconsin and Michigan, those two swing states, he's still on the ballot. So I think it's interesting that corporate media and the DNC, et cetera, are focusing on predominantly Jill Stein, but RFK Jr. is still there on the ballot in those states as well. And yes, while, it showed that RFK Jr. Dropping out of that race did help Trump a little bit, or sort of dropping out. But at the same time, it also showed that it helped Kamala Harris a little bit too, according to the data. So what that shows you is that some of the people that were supporting RFK, were willing to support Donald Trump, but some of those people were also willing to support Kamala Harris. And then you still have him on the ballot in those states. I don't think that's something that should be ignored. And I think people are kind of sleeping on that, to be honest.
Including some swing states. A recent Wisconsin poll showed Kennedy still earning 3% support. Joe St. George, Scripps News, Washington.
Of course, Harrison.
That's the one. I'm telling you, pay attention to that, because if he's earning like 3%, that's still significant as a third party. Like, just keep that in mind, as a third party or independent voter. That is still significant. So I think people kind of forgot about RFK, but he's still there in those states. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Thom Hartmann. Thom Hartmann, he was the pre-Bernie. Before Bernie Sanders came to talk about universal policies, there was a gentleman named Thom Hartmann, and he was talking about progressivism. He's the one that had explained, I showed it on the show before, he's the one that explained that the reason why we don't have universal health care in this country is because our government didn't want Black people to have health care. That came from Thom Hartmann. Thom Hartmann developed Trump derangement syndrome. And he, too, is now trying to fearmonger people out of supporting third parties. It's crazy how a lot of these people have fallen. Shout out to K-Steady QB for this one as well. I want you to hear a little bit what Thom Hartmann says here with Ali Velshi.
Joining me now is the syndicated radio talk host of the Thom Hartmann program and the New York Times bestselling author Thom Hartmann. Dino Badala also joins us. He's the host of Sirius XM's The Dino Badala Show. And he's an MSNBC daily columnist. Good morning to both of you. Thanks for being with us. Tom, on Friday, the Democrats released an ad against longtime Green Party leader Jill Stein, saying that, quote, a vote for Stein is really a vote for Trump. Jill Stein is polling at about 1%, but in some of these battleground states, particularly Michigan, that could be decisive.
Yeah, this is exactly what happened. And good morning, by the way. This is exactly what happened in 2016. In Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the number of votes that Jill Stein got in each one of those three states was greater than Trump's margin of victory. So assuming that most of those votes would have gone for Hillary Clinton instead, had she not been on the ticket, Hillary Clinton would have become president.
Pause. That's the problem with his framing, assuming that most of those votes would have gone to Hillary Clinton if Jill Stein wasn't on the ticket. And I don't know how many times I have to say this on this show. The majority of people voting third party would not support one of the two parties, hence why they are supporting a third party. And I had explained this a while back. Even if Jill Stein wasn't on the ballot, even if, any of these third party candidates weren't running at all, I still wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris. And I think that's and Thom Hartmann knows this. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is the thing, guys. Thom Hartmann is not an idiot. Thom Hartmann was kind of the father of progressivism before, like, Bernie came into the mainstream with his campaigns. A lot of that rhetoric and the policy came from Thom Hartmann. He was talking about universal policies. I remember seeing Thom Hartmann on TYT back in the day. So it just goes to show you how a lot of these people, they all have just gotten on board because people have either developed Trump derangement syndrome or they have been, pushed to do so by DNC operatives. And it's very sad. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I believe Thom Hartmann was the first person that had Bernie on, like back in the day, if I remember correctly. So you see what's happening here. So again, that assumption that it would have, but you don't know, because the reality is, like, you're assuming that people who liked Jill Stein also liked Hillary Clinton. I mean, these are two totally different candidates. Two totally different candidates. And again, notice what they're doing. They're focusing on Jill Stein because she's getting more support from Muslim voters in Michigan. I would argue that even if Jill Stein were to drop out tomorrow, which she's not, even if she did that, I would argue that most of those Muslim voters that are supporting Jill Stein would stay home. I'd be willing to bet that.
And now some of her people and apparently her as herself as well are kind of bragging, we're going to teach the Democrats a lesson. Apparently the lesson is, we'd like to have Trump for president.
Right. Well, and
so as a voter, that's our right. As a voter, that's our right. Most of us will never get the opportunity to talk to any of these politicians in person. Most of us will never get the opportunity to be in a room with these politicians and talk to them face to face, person to person. And most of these politicians have forgotten about their constituents because they've sold out to big money interests anyway. So the reality is the only way that we can make them hear us, aside from protesting, is withholding our vote. And that's our right because they don't own our vote. We don't owe them anything. And the way that Tom Hartman said that, Tom Hartman from 10 years ago would probably come back today and slap himself in the face. Because for you to sit up there and to say, oh, they're going to teach them a lesson as if genocide is not important. And for Ali Vashi to sit there, someone else who is a Muslim American, and just pretend like whatever it is, what it is, that what is it called in, for those of you that are Muslim, is there a word for a sellout like in your community? Because we've seen it with leaders of Uncommitted. For Black people, sometimes we call people Uncle Tom, we call them Sambo, that kind of thing. Is there a word for people who sell out? Right? I'm just curious because this is just sad. It's really sad. How the mighty have fallen, man. That is terrible.
And it's worth mining that a little deeper. Dean, Harris continues to struggle to secure Michigan's very large Muslim and Arab voters, some of whom are still concerned that she hasn't done enough to articulate what she will do about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Harris has called for a ceasefire. Her voice, she continues to voice support for Israel, but voters can only vote, right? All they can do is cast a ballot or not cast a ballot. There are a lot of people who are saying they're either not going to cast a ballot for her, they might sit it out, or they might vote for Jill Stein.
First of all, Ali, shame on you. Shame on you for saying people are saying she's not been vocal about how she's going to deal with this humanitarian crisis. It's a genocide. And Ali Vashi knows that. And he's been covering this story since October 7th. So shame on you, Ali. I guess you're trying to keep your job at MSNBC, unlike Mehdi, huh? Interesting.
There were two recent polls, one by the Arab American Institute and another by CARE, the big Muslim group. Usually Democratic presidential candidates, 2-1 support of Arab and Muslims. It's a different community, but there's an overlap, 2-1. This time it's neck and neck. And you have Jill Stein among Arab Americans Muslim Americans getting big support. Arab Americans, there's more gravitating to Trump than I've ever seen before. It's neck and neck with Harris. But still, these polls show things can change, Ali. And they ask people questions. And if Vice President Harris would talk about not just empathy for the Palestinian people, but a policy change, that's what people want to hear. I will enforce the Foreign Assistance Act that conditions military weapons that have to comply with international law. That's already our law. And saying you'll apply to Israel and everyone we give weapons to. We will no longer protect Israel completely in the UN. If they violate international law, we will allow them to be sanctioned. That little things, it's not turning your back on Israel. It's bringing it in compliance with international law. That could change it. It would animate people to come out and vote based on the polling. And I just spoke to Layla Elabed, the co-founder of Uncommitted, who their top priority is defeat Trump. So I want everyone to understand that.
And I want everyone to understand that Layla is Rashida Tlaib's sister. Did you hear what he just said? Their top priority is to defeat Trump. The top priority of the leaders of the uncommitted movement is not to push back against the genocide. The top priority is to defeat Trump. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people that are leaders of the uncommitted movement also have political interests or political aspirations. I wouldn't be surprised if they were offered a little something, something. You know what I'm saying? That's usually how this works. Kamala Harris is not offering what they're asking for because she doesn't intend to do it. I don't know how many times she has to sit before the community, how many times she has to do interviews saying like she is not going to withhold weapons for corporate media to accept the fact that she's not going to withhold weapons. She can't be in two camps at the same time. When you're taking money from donors, when you're taking money from AIPAC, when you're taking money from the Israeli lobby, you can't be in two camps at the same time. You can't say I'm with the Palestinian people, but also I'm not gonna stop giving any weapons to Israel because, I got to get this money from AIPAC and I don't want to be on their bad list because, they'll find a way to get me out of this election. They'll find a way to make it so that I don't win this presidency. So you can't do that. Not with this situation. And part of the problem with the Democratic Party is that they're very used to being reactive instead of proactive. And I've noticed this. The Republican Party tends to be better about being proactive. And I don't understand why the Democratic Party is not proactive. But I have noticed this over and over again. They like to wait until things happen and then say, oh, maybe we should try to do something. When there are things that could have been done to prevent the chaos, the death, the despair, and the tragedy, because they're not looking to do that.
Top priority of uncommitted is defeat Trump. Some of them, though, are not going to vote for Harris. That's the other issue. She can get them, though.
Tom, I come from Canada, where we have multiple political parties.
Canada comes from Canada, multiple political parties, and everybody has health care. Keep that in mind.
Some countries that have too many political parties. Italy has been a great example of that. Israel has been an example of that, where you can't sort of secure governance when everybody's always got a minority. That said, I'd like more political parties in America, but our structure is built around two parties, and that would need a certain amount of structural change so that a guy like Ross Perot, who got 19% of the vote, could get one electoral vote. At the moment, voting for a third-party candidate can only be thought of as a protest vote.
Pause. Let's talk about structure, since you went there, Ali. At one point in time in this country, there was segregation, lawful segregation. During like the Jim Crow South, there were different schools for people based on the color of their race, different buses, Black people having to sit in the back of the bus, white people could sit in the front of the bus. And when you think back to the infrastructure and just the system as a whole, I think about how much money was wasted for Jim Crow. Separate schools, separate dances, separate this, separate that. Like, think about how much money was wasted for that. So at that point in time, again, civil rights activists were the first to let you know, this is the structure that is set up. This is just how it is. But what if they would have just said that and not fought back? See, this is what I've noticed with particularly with corporate media and with people who are okay with the status quo, people who are liberals. Liberals are okay with the status quo. They just want a couple of reforms. They don't want to change the system. They don't want to change the structures in place. And if you do anything that goes against those very structures, then you're a problem. You're a menace. And this is why I continue to tell people, and God, like Malcolm X said this so well, this is why you got to be aware of the liberals. Because conservative, I'll say this, one thing about Republicans, they'll tell you exactly how they feel to your face. Liberals, on the other hand, they will lie to your face, tell you they approve of certain things. But the moment those things that they say should be allowed enter their neighborhood, their community, or come next door to them, they're the ones that'll pick up the phone and call the cops. So at some point, we need to start talking about removing structures that are in place. Because there were structures that were in place during the civil rights movement, but you know what? Activists fought back and got certain structures removed. Now, is there still segregation in this country? Yes, in certain respects, more so choosing. There's redlining. So there's still work that needs to be done. But the Jim Crow laws in the South not only was an economic mistake, like I said, think about the amount of money that was spent to have separate this, separate that. But also it did damage racially. It did damage to the opportunity of Black wealth. And anyone who grew up in Jim Crow South can tell you about this. And they'll tell you, like, God, what it was like back then and what that does to your psyche as a person. So for Muslim voters to just sit back and just support the people who are killing your people, what is that going to do to your psyche? What is that going to do to you later down the road? You think people who grew up under Jim Crow just forgot about what that was like? I don't think Muslim voters are going to forget what it is like to watch a genocide of their people live streamed on social media and television for over a year. Maybe it's just me.
Absolutely. The problem is that we got our system of government, our system of voting in 1789. And, it was the first time it had been done in thousands of years, and they didn't quite get it right. We have what's called first past the post, winner take all elections. And when you have that kind of an election system, and we're one of, I believe, 7 or 8 democracies in the world that have this, you end up with a two-party system. There's just no way around it. The solution to that was was developed in 1861 by John Stuart Mill, where he proposed proportional representation, where, say, if your party gets 12% of the vote, then they get 12% of the seats in Parliament. And the result of that is that you can have multiple political parties, and then you have to form coalitions and work things out. And there's a lot of negotiating going on, but it's far more democratic, and it really opens things up. The only way to do that in the United States would be with a constitutional amendment, which ain't going to happen.
Right.
Or the first way to do that, excuse me. The second way to do that would be with a national instant runoff voting program, which the Green Party has frankly been pushing for years and has gotten in more than 100 American communities now, which is a great thing. But we don't have it nationally. So without that, without instant runoff voting nationally, anytime you vote for a third party, you're basically voting against the party that you feel closest to.
All right, we'll go ahead and stop it there. But yeah, there's something to be said about that. And look, I know some of you watching me are going to vote third parties. Some of you are voting for Kamala. Some of you are voting for Donald Trump. And some of you already told me you're just going to stay at home. I mean, it is what it is. But I cannot think of a more prominent time in my adult life where I feel like this could be the time for third parties to make some type of headway for the future, meaning that if we could get someone like Jill Stein to get that 5%, think about what that means for the future to be able to receive that federal funding. A third party's movement, you have to build it. It does have to be built. And it bothers me when I hear people make it seem like it's just about this election. It's not just about this election. It's about building something that is going to be bigger and stronger and a movement and giving people an option outside of this decrepit two-party system and giving a voice to the people who are registered independents or registered no party affiliate, giving a voice to the people who said, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat. Who is speaking for me? And those people do exist. And there's a lot of them. There are a lot of people now that are registered as independents. It wasn't always that way. And so what does that tell you about the two-party system? All right, let's go to the comments. Hey. Thank you, Cool Blue. Election 2024. Likely to flip presidency from D to R. Oh yeah, we're keeping this one because sorry about that. Thank you, David. Fran Drescher sabotaged the SAG-AFTRA strike. I remember that. Thanks, Sparky. U.S. is militarily weak. BB figures that Trump may strengthen the U.S. military, so he might as well go with Trump because if the U.S. is in his pocket anyway, he's better off with a strong U.S. military. That's an interesting point. Thank you, Sparky. Perot would have won if he hadn't backed out of the election, then re-enter later. Thanks, Cool Blue. Notice the Republicans don't push anti-third party propaganda. This comes from the Democrats with allies such as MSDNC. It is wise to reject them. And that's what I was saying. You notice they don't do that? Thank you, Janice. FDR credited the 1924 Progressive Party candidate La Follette with portion of the New Deal legislation. La Follette got 70% popular vote, I think, and 3 electoral votes. Also, George Wallace received electoral votes. Thank you, Edward Shore. The liberal media can't count higher than 2. Thanks, Sparky. Republicans weren't a third party long because the Whigs disappeared. That's why I say there should be called replacement parties, not third parties. Oh, that's a good point. Thanks, Cool Blue. In 2016, Libertarian Gary Johnson received more votes than Green Jill Stein in all states. Both were on ballots. He nationally outpaced her by 2.21 points, a higher margin than Trump's PV loss to Hillary. See, I told you guys Gary Johnson was the most successful one. Thank you, Susanna. Sabby, if the Dems became desperate enough, will they resort to stealing/rigging the elections? Agreed. Sabs, tacos for life. Well, they already did that with Bernie in 2016, which Bernie Sanders now finally admitted to Theo Vaughn on his podcast. So they did that to Bernie. Thank you, Cool Blue. Tom Hartman is bottom line a Democrat. Thanks, none of your business. Is Ali Bell selling out his people too? Thank you, Roger. Tom, late, great Ed Schultz. Only one to platform Bernie. Oh, Ed Schultz. Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Baron. Did Ilhan Omar endorse genocide Harris? Ilhan Omar. I think so. I believe so. Thank you, Jasmine. Ali is trifling. If structure is his best argument against third parties, it's appalling and wrong. We started off with multiple parties anyway. Good point. Shout out to Margotina J for becoming a Sabby member. Give her a big whoop whoop. Thank you, Sparky. Actually, widespread adoption of ranked choice voting would result in more than 2 parties. And thank you, Chris C. We should just dig up Ghost of Eugene Debs. There it is. Let's go to the comments on Rockfin, Eric. Dun, 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 dun. I always feel like somebody's watching me and I have no privacy when I come home at night. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laugh 66. Shout out to Eric T. Red, who can post Rumble rants in color. Eric is very clever. Yeah, I don't know how Eric does this. And I think you guys may have noticed when Eric was on vacation because that wasn't happening on the sync because I was like, oh. Quick announcement. This is a local one. Open letter from the family. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Hardin, if you're in Massachusetts, you may have heard of this. If not, I do want to give an announcement here for the family. They are offering a $10,000 reward. And it says here, we need help to bring justice and answers to tragic and unsolved case of Anthony Hardin. He's a 30-year-old resident of Fall River, and he was tragically killed in his bedroom by Fall River police officers. Despite ongoing efforts by law enforcement, vital pieces of information are still missing, and his family continues to search for the closure they deserve. So this website is important. Eric, if you can put the link to this in the chat, because it explains how you can help to submit an anonymous tip if you have any information about Anthony Hardin. And there is going to be a rally. 1 second. There's going to be a rally on Saturday, a visual for Anthony. that you can sign up for. And that is going to be at Pleasant Street. This is Brittany Park, Pleasant Street and 15th Street, Fall River, Massachusetts. So for those of you locally, if you can reserve your spot for that, we'll put the link to that in the chat for the visual, and then also the link for the article in the event that you are able to offer some information about this particular incident. So I'll put this in here as well. I have been in talks with his father. I'm trying to see if I can do an interview with his father and try to see if we can help them out here. Because this is a terrible tragedy, and the police aren't talking. So, but I wanted to share that with you guys there. So both of those should be in the chat. Okay. All righty. Let's get to the next one. This is interesting. I didn't know about this, but we know about it now. We've been speaking a lot about like young voters and how they feel about the 2024 presidential election. Well, there is news now that apparently young men are moving towards Donald Trump. Now, this is not something that I saw coming. We've talked before about black male voters, and we've talked about like female voters and all that kind of stuff. But when it came to the younger voters in particular, somehow this part was missed. Could it be that more young men are choosing to vote for Donald Trump? Let's get into that clip here from Case Study QB. Thank you so much for this one, Case.
Our latest NBC News poll is showing a big gender gap, with young men shifting their support to Donald Trump. NBC's Shaquille Brewster went tailgating in Background, Georgia, to find out why.
Before kickoff in Atlanta, almost everyone tailgating is a Falcons fan.
I'm with NBC News. We're trying to talk to young voters.
And among young men at this NFL stadium in a battleground state,
Probably I'll vote, but probably for Trump.
You willing to tell us who you're planning to vote for? Trump?
growing support for former President Trump.
Why Donald Trump?
I enjoyed his policies, and he did treat us pretty well.
For generations, the youth vote has favored Democrats.
You go first.
But this year,
does it feel like more young people are becoming more conservative or trending in that direction?
Definitely.
It's a gap that's shrinking, with young men driving that shift.
So again, we are in Georgia, swing state, which apparently, they're interviewing these guys outside, like the Falcons game, tailgating, all that stuff. I went to college down south, so tailgating is like my jam. But swing state, where younger men are drifting towards Donald Trump. And I want you to hear the reasons why. This is important.
Vice President Kamala Harris's lead among men 18 to 29, now within the margin of error.
Why Vice President Harris?
Because I'm not voting for anybody else.
But President Biden won young men by 11 points in 2020 exit polls. For many of them, it's all about one issue.
Well, the obvious issue is going to be the economy.
Issues you care most about? Economy. Economy is the top issue for you? Why?
I'm working and I live alone, so that's a big part for me.
You see.
So everybody hearing this? Top issue is the economy. Top issue is the economy. And I continue to hear this wherever I go. It's not just these guys saying it in Georgia. People have been saying this in Massachusetts. I saw a freaking Trump parade, and I still can't believe this. I saw a Trump parade here in Massachusetts when I was driving on the interstate, and it was a parade of Trump people on an overpass above me. And I was just like, the what? Like, I never saw that before. Yes, there are people in Massachusetts who voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020 and supported Donald Trump. But that was the first time, this year has been the first time where I've seen Trump parades. So it makes you wonder, like, what's happening there. But like I said, I think a lot of voters, for them, it is the economy.
More excitement among young men for your message?
Yes. Dante Thompson is the executive director of the Georgia Young Republicans. He and his volunteers are hitting the economy message hard.
Men want to be in control of their own destiny. And those are talking points that we use when we talk to them.
Former President Trump chasing the demographic, making multiple appearances at UFC fights, and doing a round of podcasts with hosts popular among Gen Z men.
Thank you, President. And while Republicans say they see a lot of long-term opportunity in young voters, Democrats say they're working to make up lost ground.
Very aware of it. The Democratic Party is making efforts to correct it.
Devontae Jennings leads the Young Democrats of Georgia.
You got to be in the trenches talking to people, letting them know what the issues are, where you stand with the issues, and how you're actually going to care for them.
Kamala Harris recently appearing in a popular NBA podcast.
It is so good to
Thank you for sitting down with us.
Both campaigns drawing up their final plays to win this group that could decide the presidency. Shaquille Brewster, NBC News, Atlanta.
Man, that makes me want to go back to tailgate. The tailgating days, fam. So interesting, right? The economy is a big one. Young male voters. Now, some of you may be wondering, okay, but what about, younger female voters? Some of you may be wondering about that. How come their top issue is in the economy? Well, I would say it is still one of their top issues, but I think the overturn of Roe v. Wade tends to be driving more younger women to support Kamala Harris. And that could be the separation there between younger men and younger women. Whereas for younger men who, don't have to deal with being pregnant or anything like that, but they are part of the process. They're part of the process. That may not be their number one concern. Their number one concern would be the economy. And for those younger women, their number one concern may be, the overturn of Roe v. Wade, like those reproductive rights. So that could be where that separation sits. Now, we're going to do a little bit of brainstorming here tonight, and I hope you're ready to put your thinking hats on because I'm ready to do it with you. Professor Alan Lichtman, he predicted, I think it was about a month or two ago, that Kamala Harris would win the presidency. Recently, he was on News Nation, and he is not changing his opinion. He's still saying that Kamala Harris will win the presidency. And I want us to listen to a little bit of this clip, and then we're going to have a little brainstorming session because I want to tell you what I think may be happening here.
You got shaky knees over your pick with the polls being so tight?
I'm 77 years old, and I get butterflies in my stomach every 4 years, but I don't change my prediction in response to the polls. If I did, I would have been dead wrong about 2016. I would have been dead wrong about 2012 when the polls turned against Obama. Around this time in October, I would have been dead wrong about 1988 when George H.W. Bush fell 17 points behind. My system is based upon the fundamental forces that drive elections. That is, it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And the keys gauge the strength and performance of the White House party. And this whole idea of an October surprise is a huge myth.
We're going to pause here. They're talking about October surprise. We'll get into that. But these are the 13 keys to the White House that Professor Alan Lichtman uses to determine who is going to win the presidency each presidential election. Now, the one that I really want to focus on is number 3, the incumbency. And I want to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to do a little bit of a brainstorming session. Is that okay? So one thing that we do always have to keep in mind, the incumbent administration has an advantage by being the incumbent. So it is much more difficult to remove an incumbent than it is to remove someone. How can I say this? It is more difficult to remove the incumbent administration. And we've seen this time and time again. Now, does it mean it has never happened? Of course, there are outliers, right? Jimmy Carter, for one. Another one is George Bush Sr., for one, right? They were incumbents and they did not win re-election. But let's go back and revisit two things there. If I remember correctly, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right about this. If I remember correctly, didn't Ted Kennedy run against Jimmy Carter in the Democrat primary? And so that run in the Dem primary against Jimmy Carter, that actually weakened support for Jimmy Carter. Thus, we could say that led to Jimmy Carter's loss to Ronald Reagan. Okay. This is why I think the DNC did not want to have a real Democrat primary against Joe Biden, because that would have weakened Joe Biden in the general election if he remained to be, the party nominee. This is why they didn't want to give any attention really to Marianne Williamson, RFK, when he was still in the Democratic Party. And of course, Dean Phillips, right? In the case of George Bush Sr., there was Ross Perot. And so what people will say is that Ross Perot got like 19% of the support. They said, well, that's probably why, George Bush Sr. Did not win. I would argue, though, that Bill Clinton was a little bit more charismatic, and Bill Clinton also reached out to working class blue collar workers in this country. I'll give him that. Pretty much centrist president, but I'll give him that. So when it comes to the incumbency, what that means is that we're going to give Kamala 1 point ahead of Trump because she's a part of the administration that is already in the White House. So that's how we're going to play this game. She already gets 1 point because she's the incumbent. Like I said, it is very difficult to remove the incumbent administration. And although the nominee is not Biden anymore and it's Kamala Harris, it's still the Biden-Harris administration. So she was still a part of that. Let's go on a little bit more in the clip, and then we're going to do a little bit more brainstorming.
Always made my predictions before then and never changed them. When I was picking Trump in 2016, we had this immense surprise of the Access Hollywood tape with Trump bragging about assaulting women. Pundits were saying he's dead. You got to change your prediction. I didn't, and I was right.
So that's
Frank Luntz,
true. He did predict that Donald Trump would win in 2016. However, I went back and I watched that prediction today. And what he said during that time is he said, Donald Trump is a different type of candidate. And he said that I think that he's going to win, but I think the rules of my 13 keys would not apply with Donald Trump. So that's something to keep in mind. With this particular candidacy that we're talking about, it's a weird election because the president of the United States is not running for re-election. It's not him. He has moved forward the vice president, who was not a part of an open Democrat primary. She was selected and just said, you're going to be the nominee. So we got that. We have the genocide in Gaza. So there's that. We have Donald Trump, who's running for president again, who lost in 2020, but won in 2016. So there's all of that. Like it's a very weird. We have third party candidates with prominent names. Jill Stein, Cornel West, RFK Jr. is still on these ballots. People with name recognition that are running third party. We have 40% of Muslim voters in Michigan alone supporting Jill Stein, not the incumbent administration. So there's the problem with this particular election is that there's all these other pieces that you have to add to it. And I think that's what Frank Luntz is going to bring up as well.
You believe in the mythology versus the matter of fact of an October surprise?
Alan Lichtman is brilliant, and he's proven it through decades and decades of success. So I'm not going to challenge it. I'll also acknowledge that the polling this year is not indicative of virtually anything. The swing states, only all 7 of them are within 2 points of each other. It is unclear that the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris had any impact at all. Now, let me be candid, Chris, because I think it's important where we acknowledge where we get it wrong. I thought that Trump's performance was so horrific in that debate that would kill him, and it has not. And I'll also emphasize to viewers right now that Trump has incredible staying power, and that even though he seems to be unhinged, his own voters don't mind. In fact, they seem to embrace it. Chris, I think is too close to call. I've never been afraid to make a prediction, but in those states and among those key voting blocks, Donald Trump is doing surprisingly well, and Harris has been unable to close the deal.
For the people, Frank, the idea of an October surprise, do you believe in that? And what would it have to look like to make a difference in this election?
The October surprise is Joe Biden dropping out. The October surprise is Donald Trump being shot. The October surprise is Donald Trump being potentially shot at a second time. The October surprise is Israel and Gaza and Hamas and Hezbollah. The October surprise, we've been having it again and again and again. We just had it in September, or we had it in August, or we had it in July. So yes, this has been the most shocking, unstable election in terms of the events that have been happening. But Chris, the polling data has been surprisingly stable. And Harris has not moved at any point in the last 2 weeks. So I think we've got a race that is simply too close to call.
So this is a really good point here by Frank as well that I want to bring up. Also, we, typically in these elections, we don't have multiple presidential assassination attempts. So that's another thing to add to this piece. Now, another thing I wanted to bring up that Alan Lichtman said when he made his prediction originally that Kamala Harris would win is that he did not know how the two keys of foreign policy would work with this particular election because of Gaza, et cetera. He doesn't consider the protest to be mass unrest, which is one of his other keys. He said mass unrest means like people just turning the place upside down, like that kind of thing, right? So I want us to think about something here. I've been looking at these polls, guys, and I looked at Polymarket. Polymarket is betting odds, not polls. And I got to tell you something, when I'm seeing like Kamala Harris is losing all these different demographics that the Democratic Party needs in order to win, it almost sounds like it's too easy for Donald Trump. And because it sounds like it's too easy, it kind of takes me back to 2016 when it looked easy for Hillary Clinton. At one point, Hillary Clinton was like, 10, 11, 12 percentage points above Donald Trump. I think around this time, actually, in the national polls. And it looked too easy. And I remember talking to my coworkers. This is when I was still at MIT. I was talking to my coworkers and they were talking about Hillary could be the first female president. I remember all this. And I remember saying Donald Trump could actually win. And all of them just went, blasphemy. And because all of them are from, Massachusetts, they've lived in blue place, most of their life. And I've lived in red states and blue states. And I had moved here from South Carolina. And the reality is I knew people that very much agreed with what Donald Trump was saying. And I'd heard them say some of those same things that Donald Trump said when he was running for office. And they just seemed shocked that I said, I don't know, Donald Trump could actually win. And as if I was the one, like I wasn't supporting Donald Trump, but I just told them the reality. Because when you get outside of this blue bubble of Massachusetts, and there's red spots here and there, but for the most part, it's blue. When you get outside of this blue bubble of Massachusetts and you go to the redder states, you'll start to see some of these things, like some things I heard Donald Trump say again was not unusual to me. So that's why when they were so surprised, I can't believe he said that. Oh my God. I was just kind of like, nah, I've heard people say that before. So because it seems too easy, it almost makes me wonder if something else is going to happen. And I say this because I'm starting to wonder if some of those Republican voters that registered, or some of those voters that registered for the Republican Party recently, they've had a surge of GOP voters. I'm starting to wonder if some of those people are going to vote for the Republican candidates down ballot for the congressional races, gubernatorial race, city council, et cetera, but they may vote for Kamala Harris for president. And it wouldn't be the first time. It happened in 2020. There were people that voted, they were Republican, but they voted down ballot for the Republican local races, but they voted for Biden. In fact, I know one colleague of mine that did that. She's conservative. She voted for the conservative, local races, but for the president, she voted for Biden. And I'm starting to wonder, you guys can let me know how you feel about that. But something in me it just seems a little too, in the fact that the information has been put out there as early as it had, like she's behind with black men, she's behind with young men, all men, she's behind with black women, she's behind with the workers, she didn't get the endorsement of the Teamsters, she didn't get the endorsements of the firefighters. And so that's why I feel like it almost sounds a little too easy. And I'm wondering if there are some people who are just like they're silent Trump voters who don't say anything out loud, but they're going to vote for Donald Trump in those liberal areas. We have them here in Massachusetts. I believe that there are also silent Harris supporters. I believe that there are some conservatives that are going to vote for Kamala Harris, but they're not telling anybody. I believe it. I mean, we never really know until we get to election day, but I just have this, it just all seems a little too, we can bookmark this and I can come back to this after election day. And if I'm wrong, you guys can say, man, you were wrong. You can roast me. I don't care. But it just feels I don't know. If I had to pick a person today, I couldn't say, but it all just feels a little too easy. And it almost feels like there's this hidden, wave of people somewhere, particularly probably suburban women that are going to come out en masse and support Kamala Harris that are not being reported in the polls. We'll have to see. We will have to see. Okay. And I think we can go to part 2 with Type V and C, Eric. And I'm just going to go ahead and go to the comments here. See, I see people are saying different things in the chat now. Mike said, I think Kamala will win. Yeah, I'm telling you guys, don't put it past the Democratic Party, because I feel like there's so many people saying Kamala's going to lose that I feel like it seems too easy that like she would, I don't know. We may never know. I'm telling you, I do think there are silent Kamala supporters. I would not be surprised. Savitha said, yes, white women can totally do that. And that could be the demographic that comes out for her. Including conservative women, including some of those that are conservative that maybe, voted for DeSantis or Nikki Haley in the GOP primary, but don't want Trump. We shall see. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Goba. Just early voted for Jill Stein in Charlotte, North Carolina. A revolution starts by saying F the duopoly. Thank you. Wayne, Geraldo Rivera is not supporting Trump anymore. He is part of the Republicans for Harris. Wow, that's interesting. They got Geraldo? Wow. Vivian, just moved to Mass. Crazy to me to see so many Trump signs in the state. I know. And I'm telling you guys, I did not see that before. There's maybe a house here, a house there that had it. But for the most part, Julian, I saw a few Trump flags in Dorchester, more than I remembered in 2020. Yeah, it's crazy. I'm noticing it in Massachusetts. Thank you, Sparky. Young men have been left behind for decades, so they figure, why not? I have nothing to lose. Thank you, Samud. Because they're still going to try and unalive him, in my opinion. Thank you, Cool Blue. Losing ground or losing in general, any of your party's demographics can apply to only that particular election. That can also be a trend, present, future. That can also become a realigning pattern. That is interesting, Cool Blue. And Bronny, it is more important for the progressive movement that Jill Stein get 3 to 7% of the vote than for a neocon like Kamala Harris to get elected. I hear you, Bronny. I guess you're a Lakers fan. Let's get the comment on Rockfin, Roger. Thank you. Dracula, werewolf, fox, wolf, good cop, bad cop, northern racist, southern racist, Satan, Lucifer, Democrat, Republican, Sabrina. We look at Jon Stewart, Tom Hartman, Chuck D, Amy Goodman, Randy Rhodes, and say what happened to them. Nothing. We just moved past them. That's all. Some of those I mentioned made their bones during Bush, yet were quiet under Bill, O, and Joe. Tom, I got a plan to get an amendment. Interesting. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Unfuck the World. RFK didn't sort of drop out. He totally did and asked his supporters to please vote for Trump to get RFK into the administration. States refusing to take him off the ballots are trying to trick RFK fans. Okay. Now let's get to the Kamala interview story. Kamala Harris recently had an interview with Charlamagne the God, and she had an interview on Fox News. We're going to go through both of those, couple of highlights, and we're going to start with this one here from Charlamagne. This is the question about how she felt about Barack Obama waving his finger at Black men about not supporting Kamala Harris. Listen to this, guys.
But I do want to say, President Obama was out there last week waving his finger at Black men. When are Liz Cheney and Hillary Clinton going to wave their finger at white women? When are Bill Clinton and Joe Biden going to wave their finger at white men? Because 52% of white women voted for Trump in 2016. 55% voted for Trump in 2020. They all voted against their own interests. When the finger waving going to start at them?
So I'm going to go ahead and give some credit to Charlamagne the God for that one, because I was surprised that he did ask that question. I know he likes Kamala. He endorsed Kamala Harris in 2020 when she was in the Democrat primary, when she was running for president. So I know that he likes her. So I was surprised that he asked that question, but it is a good question.
Well, thank you for highlighting that. I do have the support of over 200 Republicans who worked for various administrations, including everyone going back to Ronald Reagan, to the Bushes, to John McCain and Mitt Romney, and including Liz Cheney. And I'm very proud to have her support. And I believe that many of them who may have voted for Trump before are supporting me because they know the stakes are so high in terms of our very democracy and rule of law. And
so the finger wagging should start today or tomorrow.
Well, I think what is happening is that we are all working on reminding people of what is at stake, and that is very important.
But I do want to say,
so long story short, Kamala Harris didn't answer the question. How do you feel about Barack Obama waving his finger, wagging his finger at Black men for not supporting you the way that they supported him? She didn't answer the question. She dodged it, which is something that she's been doing quite some time, right? Because she doesn't want to, here's the thing, she doesn't want to criticize Barack Obama. That's what that is about. She didn't even ask the question about why aren't they waving their finger at white voters who are not supporting you? Then we get to the part about reparations. Oh my God. Charlamagne the God is asking her, what is her stance on reparations?
My question to you is, what's your stance on reparations? We all know that America became great, off the backs of free Black labor. How progressive are you on making it a priority and righting America's wrongs? It's understood that you are running for president for all people of America. Asking for specifics for Black communities doesn't mean don't do for others, but Black Americans are heavily asked to vote Democrat in every election for over half a century with very little in return. What are your plans to address these very important issues and change that narrative?
Thank you, Zeke.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for your work. So to your point, yes, I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that.
Pause. What I tell you? What did I tell you about studies? Anyone telling you that we need a study on reparations, and not just reparations, other options as well, but particularly reparations, they're not really trying to pass reparations because the study has already been done. Dr. Sandy Darity has been on this show. He's been on Bad Faith. He's been on a number of podcasts to talk about his research. He wrote a whole book about it called From Here to Equality. The study has already been done. Let me explain something to you guys. Whenever you hear politicians say that we need a study or we have this bill, it needs to be studied, that is where legislation goes to die. Oftentimes, when a bill or piece of legislation goes to a study, there's no study being done. It's just a room that you send it to just rest, relax, and never to be seen from or heard again. This is the same thing like HR 40. This bill, they say, oh, we got the reparations, HR 40, which HR 40 is not actual reparations. But the reality is, like, that's what that actually means. And it's something that politicians say to get you to understand, oh, I agree with it, and to make you think they're going to do something, but they're not going to do anything with it. There needs to be a study. And by the way, some people are freaking out on social media and said, oh my God, she said reparations. She said a study. Oh my God. She said that in 2020. When she ran for president in 2020, first town hall, she said, yeah, reparations needs to be studied. How quickly people forget. So some people are dancing saying, yay, she's pro reparations. No, she's pro study, which means ain't nothing going to happen, boo. We can't keep falling for the okie doke. Okay. I'm not going to let you guys fall for it.
And I've been very clear about that position. In terms of my immediate plan, I will tell you a few of the following. One, as it relates to the economy, which is a lot of what you have addressed. Look, I grew up in the middle class. My mother, worked hard, raised me and my sister. And by the time I was in high school, she was able to afford our first.
There we go again with, I grew up in a middle class family. Reparations has nothing to do with class. Reparations is a debt that is owed. So what I've noticed with Kamala Harris is when she runs out of things to say, it's, I grew up in a middle class family. I saw there were kids on TikTok making fun of this, by the way, making fun of the I grew up in a middle class family. So it's bad when children know what you're doing. I said, I know they don't have these kids on here making fun of this. And then there's this part here that I also want to highlight. This is a caller. So someone called in, again, this was town hall style. Someone calls in and they're going to ask Kamala Harris, you guys giving all this money to Ukraine and to Israel. What about us here in America? That will determine whether or not I will support you. Listen to what Kamala Harris says.
Take some calls. Let's take some, not calls, let's go to the talkback feature.
My question for Kamala is, why are we, and I say we because my tax dollars is sending the money.
Hold up. The way that she started this off, listen.
Take some calls. Let's take some, not calls, let's go to the talkback feature.
My question for Kamala is, why are we, and I say we because my tax dollars is sending the money.
Come on, guys. We all know we had this friend. That would say, my question is, we all had that friend. I love it. She didn't hold back.
Why are we sending money to other countries when we desperately need it in our own country for homeless, housing, resources, for whatever? That is my determining factor if I vote for Kamala or not.
That's one of the reasons the America First rhetoric resonates, because nobody in America would complain about where money was going if American citizens' everyday needs were being met. So what do you say to that?
So there's Charlamagne the God there to let her know that everyday Americans' needs are not being met. Now, you heard what the caller said. Listen to what Kamala Harris says.
We can do it all, and we do.
We can do it all, and we do. So in other words, and notice the look on her face. She seems like she's upset there because that was said to her. If we are doing it all, If we do it all, then why is it that the homelessness rate has continued to increase? Why are people constantly being evicted? Why are people living paycheck to paycheck? Why are people having medical debt and no health insurance or inadequate health insurance because it's attached to your employer? Why are people drowning in student loan debt? Why are people, choosing to have to be a minimalist because they can't afford shit? Why are kids who are graduating from college and undergrad having to live in apartments with 4 other people because the rent is too damn high? If we did it, why is that the average American can't afford to buy a single family home, regardless, if they're making $100,000 a year, et cetera? Why is it? If we do it. So Kamala Harris and people on the sneak, Kamala Harris is basically saying to the caller, you're lying. She's basically calling the caller a liar, when in actuality, Kamala is the one that is lying. Because we don't do it. That's the thing. And you know what she said? My question is, why is all of my money going towards, and she's right. Americans aren't dumb. We can see.
So, first of all, I maintain very strongly America should never pull ourselves away from our responsibility as a world leader. And that is in the best interest of our national security and each one of us as Americans and our standing in the world. That being said, we also have an obligation to American citizens, obviously, and people who are here to meet their everyday needs and challenges, which is why, for example, we have done the work in the last 4 years of bringing down the cost of prescription medication, whether it be $35 a month for seniors for insulin or $2,000 a year cap on prescription medication.
Pause. That $35 cap for insulin, because they like to leave this out for the seniors, that was for seniors on Medicare. Because you can be senior age and not be on Medicare. So this is another thing. Like, why is it that you only cap the cost of insulin for seniors on Medicare? What about everybody else that needs insulin? What about everybody else that's diabetic and has to still pay the regular price? So you see, so the woman is right. The woman who called in was right. Ay.
What we have done that has been about putting $17 billion in our HBCUs. I am proud to be the first HBCU vice president of the United States. I intend to be the first HBCU president of the United States.
That means absolutely nothing. Okay. So stop it with the, look, I respect, like, you went to HBCU, great, good for you. What does that mean in terms of helping the American people? Now we come in with credentials. I don't give a damn. What is it with the people who want to tell you about where they went to school? Who cares? That has nothing to do with what that woman called in about, helping the American people. You going to a HBCU doesn't mean that you're going to give people health care. That doesn't mean that you're going to cut these costs like you claim that you're going to cut the groceries. We'll see. That doesn't mean those things. That doesn't mean that you're going to fix the homelessness issue. That doesn't mean you're going to stop giving money to Ukraine and Israel. What are you talking about? It's all about, this is why me and the Boule don't get along. Because it's all about credentials. It's all about, I went to HBCU. I, interned with Barack Obama. I used to work with the Obama administration. It's always Obama. I used to work with the Obama administration. I know where so-and-so lives in DC. I'm a part of the Democratic Party, such and such. I'm a DNC delegate. I'm a da-da-da-da. That's why I don't get along with the Boule, because it's all about what you have. This is a class issue. And maybe this presidential race will be decided by class. Because what I notice is a lot of people that are blue collar workers, regardless of what color you are being overlooked heavily by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party only want to talk to people, particularly black people. They only really want to talk to black people that went to HBCUs. As if every black person can attend college. They can't. Every black person can't afford to go to college. Every black person don't want to take out these student loans and end up with more debt. So if the only way that the Black community gets your attention is because they went to a HBCU, that tells me something about you and your class. And this is a big problem that I've had, and I've said it before. We have a class problem, even within the Black community.
Those resources are about sending them to centers of academic excellence that I know them to be. The work that I continue to do is about increasing access to capital for our small businesses.
Here we go. It's the same old, same old. And now we're going to pivot to the Fox News one, right? So the Fox News interview, let's dive into this, okay? Let's get with it. Start right out the gate. The first question is about the border. Now, there are, I think, two spots I want to go to in this one. The first one is the border, and then we'll get to the other two. Some people think she did a good job here. Some people think she did not do a good job. Let's find out.
Madam Vice President, thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Brett.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration, because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett.
This is Brett trying to get Kamala Harris just to get to the answer the question, right? Like, he asked about the number. So Kamala Harris is going to do the word salad. She's going to have a video essay, right? So she's going to do a video essay because she don't want to answer that question.
Let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a
an
rough
immigration
estimate of
system
6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico.
They kept those kids in cages, though. I noticed Brett didn't mention that. They continued to have kids in cages, though.
And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the... Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate,
and
they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm in the middle of responding to the point you're raising, and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's a good point that he mentioned there. And by the way, I do not like Fox News at all. But that was a good point that he mentioned about you had the White House, the House, and the Senate. Listen to what she says.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things, including to address our asylum system and put more resources, getting more judges, what we needed to do to tighten up penalties and increase penalties for illegal crossings, what we needed to do to deal with points of entry between border entry points. That's the work we did, and we worked on supporting what was a bipartisan effort, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress to actually strengthen the border. That border bill would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more resources into prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done as the Attorney General, former Attorney General of a border state.
Madam Vice President, a couple of things.
Prosecuted trafficking of drugs, guns, and human beings. And Donald Trump, but let me just finish.
6 Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that.
Okay. So what she is going to proceed to say is that Donald Trump learned about that bill and contacted Republican politicians and told them not to vote for it so he could use it as a political tool against Kamala Harris during this election. I've heard the speech over and over. I can cite it for you. However, something that he mentioned there, 6 Democrats voted against it. Well, Donald Trump didn't contact the Democrats. Donald Trump contacted the Republicans, right? So why did those 6 Democrats vote against it? Maybe it was something wrong with the bill itself. Maybe there was something that was a part of that bill that they, just could not agree on. And that's the problem with bills. Like, we need single issue bills. I do agree that we should have that, and not these bills that include all of these other issues. And if there's that one issue that you do want to pass, it's like you got to vote for that entire bill. It's bullshit. It's BS, but it's on purpose. It's on purpose. I can tell you that much. What about those 6 Democrats? Is that Donald Trump's fault too? See, we got to think about these things.
That bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election, this is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions, and they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue,
I hear you,
but actually is focused on fixing it.
6 Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it.
So everybody look who voted against it. Even Bernie Sanders voted against it. And Bernie has been cheerleading the Biden administration, all this time. Cory Booker, who is Kamala and Biden's probably biggest fan, voted against it. Ed Markey from Massachusetts voted against it. Kirsten Sinema, you all over the place. Padilla voted against it. And Butler from California voted against it. So these are not people that support Donald Trump. So this is why you got to, again, I'm glad he did bring up that question.
These are the 6 Democrats. But more importantly, back to the original premise, Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Brett.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungare's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I'm so sorry for her loss. Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions. Let's talk about that as well.
But do you want to answer
in all fairness, I told you, I feel awful for what she and her family have experienced.
During that time, you said repeatedly that the border was secure. When in your mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration even before. Let's all be honest about that. I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed. We need more. I was just down at the border talking with border agents, and they will tell you, and I'm sure you probably, I know you investigate and you are a serious journalist. They will tell you, we need more judges. We need to process those cases faster. We need the support for those cases that should be prosecuted. They need more resources, and Congress ultimately is the only place that's going to get fixed, Brett.
Well, pause, because she gave away the game. And this is what I've been telling people before. A lot of times when these candidates are running for president, they have a number of policies that they say that they are going to get done. And what you have to remember is that it is important to push those presidential candidates on what can they do by executive order. Out of this list of policies that you gave me, what could you do on day one by executive order? Because a lot of the things that they mention has to be done by the approval of Congress. And so what I've noticed with Kamala Harris in particular is that she'll tend to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give people $25,000 down payment. Those things have to be approved by Congress, which is not going to get. And so this is how it works, people. They know. They run on things they know is not going to pass instead of running on things that they can do by executive order. That's what they do. And one of the things I noticed that Jill Stein has done, like she's focusing on, this is what I can do by executive order. She had told people what I can do by executive order. She'll tell you. But Kamala's not doing that. And so you're getting people's hopes up, especially people that are really excited about this $25,000 tax credit for a house, whatever. It keeps changing every other week. There are people who are excited about that. And Kamala Harris knows damn well that that has to get through Congress, which she knows it's not going to. That's the problem. Right now, the Republicans are winning in the Senate. They have 50 seats in the Senate. I think there's 5 seats right now that need to be filled. I don't think all 5 of them are going to go to the Democratic Party. They could get most of them, but the reality is the Republicans right now are winning the Senate. So how's that going to get through? Woo!
How this system works.
That's the premise of this question. There were 90 plus executive orders that were rescinded in the first days. Many of those were Trump border policies. I'm not going to stay here because there's other things to talk about, but you frequently talk to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said, you've been, quote, a failure with border security. Why do you think they said that?
Oh boy.
I think they're frustrated, and I get it. They want support. They want support, and that's what that border security bill would have done. These guys down at the border, these men and women, they're working hard. They're working around the clock. I get it.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, who governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
This interview, really, I bet you when she got home after this interview, she probably had a drink. What do you guys think? She probably had a drink when she got home.
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
But let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations, from the Sinaloa cartel to the Guadalajara cartel, to people who have trafficked in guns, drugs, and human beings. I have spent a significant part of my career going after people who present a threat to the safety of the American people.
You have spent a significant part of your career arresting Black men, using prison labor in California. You overpacked the jails so bad that the federal judge had to tell you that your prisons were overcrowded. You spent part of your prosecutor career arresting parents for truancy, adding to the school to prison pipeline system. Yeah, you spent some time doing some things as a prosecutor, but notice she never mentions that. She never mentions the truancy record. She never mentions going after Black men, particularly, even though also for marijuana, which she now seems to be in favor of legalizing. Like, she never mentions those things. She's just like, I attacked those gangs at the border. You attack Black people too. A lot of Black people. Aye.
And cross our border with the intent of doing us harm, and cross our border illegally. And I will do that work as vice president. I take that work quite seriously.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that he never advocated for that prison policy and no gender transition surgeries
you know what, you got to take responsible for what happened in your administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in his presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassessment surgeries?
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads, trying to create a sense of fear in the voters, because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people. Whereas, at $20 million on that ad, on an issue that, as it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote. And again, his policy was no different. Look at where we are, though.
They say it was different.
So this part was really interesting because she calls out how much money that was spent on an ad, but both parties spent a lot of money on ads. I mean, come on. It's just, this is something that they both do. But the thing is, you can't get mad, Kamala, when someone uses your own words that you said against you when they're running against you as an opponent. So if you didn't agree with what you said, then just say you don't agree. But why did you say it? if you do agree. You see what I'm saying? So like, that's how politics works. You can't get upset when someone takes a video footage of you where you said something that you may not agree with now, but you did say it. That's how politics works. And both parties do that against each other. We're going to fast forward to the 14 mark here because there's something right about here I wanted to get into. Oh yeah. No difference between herself and Biden. I do want to get to this part. Oh, sorry guys. The Twitter sometimes it let me reload. Twitter videos sometimes do that. Let me see if I can get to the 14s.
That would be, and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that. His plan would be, again, to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on.
It's funny when they keep mentioning billionaires because both politicians are taking money from billionaires. Both Kamala and Trump are doing
shows last week. What, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden? Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I know.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes in to office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan.
Pause. Let me tell you something here, okay? So Kamala Harris is letting you know that she invites opinions and ideas from Republicans and others, but she's not willing to invite ideas from those who are pro-Palestinian activists. She's not willing to hear ideas from those to the left of her. Kamala Harris right now kind of sounds like a conservative. Like, listen to her. She's like, I'm going to be tough on the border, even though she's in that position right now where she could be. She was assigned to the border. She says that I'm going to work along with Republicans. I'm hanging out with Liz Cheney, and I got an endorsement from Dick Cheney, neocon, warmonger, racist Dick Cheney. She's bragging about that. But the DNC wants you to be afraid of Jill Stein and anybody outside of the two-party system because they could give you a Republican presidency, but you literally have Kamala Harris running and adding Republicans to her campaign and telling you to your face that she's going to put Republicans in her cabinet. Do you see why the duopoly is just one corporate party? So she's willing to hear from conservatives. She's willing to hear from others, but not the others like us. She's not willing to hear from progressives. She don't want to hear from socialists, leftists. Her father was a Marxist economist. She doesn't want to hear from those type of people. She don't want to hear from those pro-Palestinian protesters. She apparently don't really want to get down with regular black people like that either. It's all about the HBCU crowd. Kamala Harris was willing to allow Republicans to come up on the stage at the Democratic National Convention, but she wouldn't allow one Palestinian American give a speech on the stage which endorsed her at the end. That's who Kamala Harris is. She tells you she's not going to be a continuation of Joe Biden. She is going to be a continuation of Joe Biden. You know how I know? Because when I went through her policy platform, I showed you guys a lot of that stuff came from Joe Biden's website. In fact, it was caught at one point early on where they didn't remove the Joe for 2024 name. This stuff isn't new. They just recycled what Joe Biden was going to run on for 2024, where they had started drafting with this website, and put Kamala Harris's name on it. You think she came up with this stuff on her own? She ain't come up with this on her own. Come on. You are voting. If you're voting for Kamala, you got to realize what you're getting. You're getting a female tan Biden in a wig. That's what you got.
And for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing. Addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president.
Here I am on the road again. Here I am, turn the page. And that's the reality. You're not really turning the page. What you are getting is a continuation of Biden presidency, but also a continuation of the status quo. It is what is digestible for the Democratic Party, and also digestible for, some of the mainstream Republicans that have openly supported Kamala Harris as well. That's what you're getting. So, people aren't stupid. And I think a lot of Americans do realize that. They just don't want Donald Trump. And that's the thing. A lot of people that are supporting Kamala Harris may not necessarily be crazy about her platform or lack thereof, some may say. Some of them are just supporting her because they don't want Donald Trump. And Kamala Harris knows that. That's why she doesn't have to be a change candidate. You think about that. When was the last time we had someone running as a change? Bernie Sanders was running as a change candidate. Change candidate. She doesn't have to do that because the competition is Donald Trump. Now imagine if Donald Trump didn't win that nomination, right? What if Nikki Haley would have won that nomination? Then she would have to be a change candidate. You see what I mean?
That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
But
people
you're the
have
lever of
become.
power.
But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president. One, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
If that's the case, why is half the country supporting him? Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states? Why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States? Why is that happening?
And ladies and gentlemen, that is the golden question of the night. And I was asking that question too, because the reality is, if Donald Trump is as bad as they say that he is and shouldn't even have any chance of winning, then why is he even polling as well as he's polling? That tells you something about the Biden-Harris administration. When voters tell you their number one issue is the economy, that says something about the current administration with the economy. So there's that. And then another thing that I want to bring up as well, which I think we really need to point to, is the fact that how do you win in 2016? You lose re-election, and then you're running again, and it's this close. And that's the thing that, I would love to be a fly on that wall. I would love to be on a fly on that wall and hear what they're talking about behind closed doors, those Democrat strategists, because I'm willing to bet you what they're probably saying behind closed doors versus what they're saying on social media is there's no way in hell it should even be this close. That's probably what they're saying behind closed doors. How the hell is this guy even polling the way that he's polling, considering, January 6th, et cetera, and the Democrats beat him in 2020? How is it that he's even polling this way? I bet you behind closed doors, there are some difficult conversations that are being had, and it's not what you see on mainstream media. It's not what you're seeing on social media. That's for sure. On social media, they're never going to let you know that things are not too great. So that's something we have to keep in mind. But that is a good question. How is that the case? If he was so bad and you guys are so great, why is it this close?
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
I know, but
it's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a cakewalk. So
are they misguided, the 50%? Are they stupid? What is it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
Right. So again, after saying all those things, why is he so close to you in the polls? Why is he doing as well as he's doing? What does that say about your administration and this economy?
I asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the president of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
You're one to talk about locking people up. You might want to let that one slide or sit back a little bit. But the reality is, again, according to what she is saying, why is he so close to you? And why is he performing as well as he is performing based on what has been said? What does that say about you? What does that say about your candidacy? That is a problem. And that's the part I think that Brett is trying to pick out. Again, I'm not a fan of Fox News, but what he said there, that's what he's saying. Why is he doing so well?
And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump, you call Donald Trump, he's misguided. You say now
he's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Damn. This is why she shouldn't have said, whether you agree with it or not, considering the fact that you're Joe Biden's vice president, probably wasn't a good idea to say that Donald Trump is unstable, considering that Joe Biden is unstable. So what Brett did there, I see what you did, Brett. What Brett did there is he like, you know what? Let me ask her how long she knew that Joe Biden was unstable. I mean, it's got to be difficult. It's got to be difficult because the thing is, again, like, how can you, being a part of the Biden administration, there was a poll that was done when Biden dropped out of the race. And the poll said that the majority of, I guess, Democrat voters feel that Kamala Harris knew all along. There was a poll for that, right? So he's trying to turn that on her. But I don't even think he's able to ask that question if she didn't say that Donald Trump was unstable, etc. So,
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
Madam Vice President.
But she didn't answer the question about Joe Biden, right? And I don't think anyone else has asked her about this question during an interview, but the reality is people have been asking that question offline. Like, people have been asking, like, how long did she know? How long did Nancy Pelosi know? How long did Barack Obama know? Like, we all saw what was happening in front of our face. We're not stupid. And for the longest time, like, they were going to stick with this guy. They were going to stick with this guy. Had it not been for his performance during the debate, had it not been for those internal polls, and they said, Joe, you can't win. And so they said, you need to step aside. Remember, Joe Biden did not want to step out of the race. He wanted to continue. Remember, he said that he's strong. He said he's fine. Everything's cool. But Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries got together and told him, you got to go. So that's how that worked out. We'll go on a little bit more here, folks.
Two more things. You were asked on 60 Minutes about the biggest threat that the world faces, that the U.S. faces. This is what you said.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious one in mind, which is Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? This attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
A number of experts thought you would say China. The FBI director had said that. But you said Iran. If that's the case, what do you say to critics who look at the actions of your administration and say you're not acting like Iran is the number one threat?
Well, I will tell you most recently, whether it was in April or in October, in the several hours on each occasion that Iran posed a threat to Israel, I was there. Most recently in the Situation Room, in the most recent attack, working with the heads of our military and doing what America must always do to defend and to support Israel in its requirement to defend itself, and to give American support to be able to allow Israel to have the resources to defend itself against attack, including from Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies in the region.
Right.
And that
but those
is,
proxies
and,
were getting
and
funded
my
by
commitment
Iran.
to that is unyielding and unwavering.
Why did they always say unyielding and unwavering? So Kamala Harris is already like a broken script. I know what you're going to say every time you're asked certain questions. I can probably just start quoting it for you guys. Like unyielding, unwavering. Fuck Israel. You don't even have support that is unwavering and unyielding for us. They don't have support. They don't have unwavering support for us. Does everybody understand this? They want to give you crumbs, give you scraps, but Israel gets whatever it wants. So when it comes to Israel, it's unwavering. It's unyielding. It's ridiculous. Now, let me tell you where Brett messes up here. Because what Brett is doing is he's trying to prove to the audience that Kamala Harris is not pro-Israel enough. That actually helps Kamala Harris, because that can help her with the progressive voters that are still on the fence and are like, I don't know what I want to do because I'm against the genocide in Gaza. I, don't want Trump to win, but I feel bad about if I support Biden, Kamala Harris, because they're giving the money and the weapons to Israel to let them do what they're doing. And I'm afraid to vote. I'm thinking about third party, but I don't know. So when Brett tries to prove, and Trump is doing this too, when they try to say that she's not pro-Israel enough or she's like a Palestinian, all that is doing is that could actually help Kamala with the progressives who are on the fence. That's a weird talking point. I don't understand that. They think that that's like a hit. That's a gotcha. It's not. Because remember, there's a significant amount of progressives that don't want to support Kamala Harris because of the genocide. And then there are some that are just kind of on the fence and they're like, I don't know what I want to do. So that could convince some of those that are on the fence. They're like, oh, okay, well, they're proving that she's actually not that pro-Israel, when in actuality she is. AIPAC doesn't give you money. The Israeli lobby doesn't give you money for you to just be, I'm just okay with Israel. No, they give you that money to be pro-Israel. And that's what she is. So I don't understand this talking point, and I really don't think like that is a win for Trump. I think that's a win for Kamala Harris.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions.
Let's go back to Donald Trump, who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put Iran in check.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's
that
administration that Iran
regime
that we had an American military base that was attacked.
Everybody see what this is all about? Oil. This is what it all comes down to: oil. This is why there's so much turmoil. A part of the reason there's so much turmoil in the Middle East, there's racism too. Let's get it straight. Israel is a racist apartheid state. But at the same time as well, these resources, oil. Imagine if there was no oil in the Middle East. Imagine if there were no resources in the Middle East that could be exploited. And I wonder what the lives would have been like for other Muslims in that region had there not been resources that could be exploited. Makes you wonder. We'll go ahead and wrap it up here.
Where American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries and Donald Trump dismissed them as headaches, not to mention how Donald Trump has
all of this money
has treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers,
Hamas,
has diminished the significance.
We're talking over each other. I apologize.
I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about this election.
So that's when they were wrapping up, because this is something that he said here. Apparently, I guess she was late to the interview, and then I guess he said he was pressed for time.
Dana, you've been on the other side. You've been on the rapper as a press secretary interviewing a president. And, you know, I'm talking like 4 people waving their hands like it's got to stop. So, Martha, final. I had to dismount there at the end. There's so many things, and she maybe should do more of these.
Well, I think so.
Yeah. So apparently there was something there that was happening towards the end of the interview. I guess they were trying to tell him they got to go or something like that. So there's that as well. All in all, I think that those interviews with Kamala Harris, I think she needs to tell people the truth about the economy. Like, stop lying to when people call in, stop lying and saying, oh, we do help Israel and Ukraine, but we're also taking care of Americans too. You're not. Just admit that there's work that needs to be done. The problem for Kamala Harris is that she's a part of the current administration. Had it have been someone that ran in that spot like Gavin Newsom, which I heard behind the scenes, I guess he was kind of butthurt. But had it had been someone like Gavin Newsom, whose name was floating around for quite some time, he wouldn't have had the same issue that Kamala has with the Gaza issue or with the economy or anything the Biden administration did, because he wasn't a part of the current administration. Now, you can still point fingers at him for how he's screwed up things in California economically, but I think he would have had an easier time. And I think that's why people were kind of pushing him, like floating his name around out there. Yeah, buddy. Crazy times. Let's go to the comments. Thank you, Gayla. One of his keys was weak third-party candidate. Jill Stein is not weak. Yeah, I don't know. His keys, I feel like sometimes, I feel like the definition for those keys don't always remain the same, if that makes sense. Thank you, Sparky. Many women tell their husband, pollsters, or boyfriend they're voting for whomever their man is voting for to be polite, then vote for whomever their girlfriends vote for. Oh, that's a good point. Thank you, Black Progress Network. Sabby Sab, great show. Thank you. Thanks, Vivian, for the super sticker. Thank you so much. And thank you, Juanita, for the super sticker. Thank you, Black Progress. Just say no to the okie doke. Thank you, Bronny. Holding your breath, waiting for Democrats to get reparations passed. It's a sure way to unalive yourself. Wall Street owned DNC will never allow it. Yeah, I've explained that to people. Thank you, none of your business. Who owns and PGMs the voting machines wins. Thank you, Courtney. Yes, it's a class issue within our Black race, and that was made clear in Chicago during the DNC. There you go. Thank you, Bronny. The immigration bill gave $60 billion to Ukraine. There you go. Thanks, Sparky. Kamala memorizes a general answer to each subject, like some of those beauty pageant girls. Thanks, Courtney. It seems like she had a drink before the interview. Everybody keeps saying that. Thanks, Sparky. When she got home, Kamala had a drink and ate a whole bag of nacho cheese Doritos. Thanks, New York Varsity. The immigration bill promises a path to citizenship in an 8-year time period. Anyone know if that is any different than now? Anyone? That's a good question. I know one former classmate told me her citizenship took 10 years. Thank you, Sparky. Actually, the Biden-Harris administration just changed the Passe Comitas Act, where Army and some other active duty military can kill U.S. citizens on American soil if government doesn't like their protests. Interesting. And thank you, Marvin. About de-dollarization and BRICS, Iran part of it too. All right. And we are moving to the ballot initiatives. We'll start with Florida tonight. I'll finish it Sunday. Guys, I'm not going to be live tomorrow night. I have plans tomorrow with the fam, but I'll be live on Sunday. But we are now moving to Florida. So we've been covering the ballot measures for 2024, all of those states that have ballot initiatives. And so you know what is going to be on the ballot for your state. So now we are moving to the Sunshine State, Florida. So what's interesting about Florida, and we'll just sum this up for you, is that constitutional amendments and these they can initiate constitutional amendments through a direct initiative. So that means that a successful petition drives bypass Florida legislature and goes directly on the ballot for voters to vote. So again, as I've said before, there are a number of states that are indirect, meaning it has to go through the legislature and they approve what gets on the ballot. That's my state, Massachusetts. And then there are those states where it's direct, where they can just bypass the legislature and it goes directly on the ballot. So Florida has some interesting ones this year. If you live there, you might want to pay attention. The Florida Amendment Partisan School Board Elections Amendment. Dun, dun, dun. Interesting. A yes vote supports making school board elections partisan. Beginning in the November of 2026, general election and for the primary elections nominating party candidates for the 2026 election. A no vote opposes making school board elections partisan, thereby maintaining current procedures where school board members are elected in a nonpartisan election. There is a supermajority requirement in Florida. Everyone, this is important. In Florida, 60% of the vote is required for voters to approve Amendment 1. If this were a new tax or create tax, it will require 66%. So I told you guys before, some of these states require a supermajority. That means that if the majority of people vote for something, that doesn't mean it necessarily passes. You have to have that 60% in order for it to pass, right? My state isn't like that, but some states are that way. It makes it harder for them to pass these measures. So let's see who supports this. We have Republican senators and representatives that support it. One of the arguments is that parties engage in these races. There's no such thing as a nonpartisan race anymore. The races are partisan, and the only ones that aren't informed are being tricked. And what happens is there are games that are played all the time in these races. And what I'm trying to do is pull the bag off of the voters' heads. Interesting. Who opposes it? We have Democrat senators and representatives, Angela Nixon, Bobby Powell Jr., and one of their arguments is, I believe this bill is not about transparency at all. This bill is about making our school board elections and our school boards more contentious, more like DC, which Republicans honestly always try to oppose. Interesting. Right now, there is no money spent to support this measure or oppose it. And there's a note here from Roger, who puts these together for me. He said, see this right here. I often speak in America where political parties are should be abolished. It is my belief that when partisanship is out of the way, as well as who the big money interests shift towards institutions and businesses that are democratically run, then those who are elected by the people that they're supposed to serve. Okay, so this is a really good point. He goes on to say, for what purpose does it serve? And for whom does it serve? Why does the school board have to be partisan? To serve the interests of their parties, to grow their parties. Your local school board in 41 states are nonpartisan, which means they operate in a manner that is collaborative, cooperative, and cohesive rather than polarizing. So this is a really good point. If it were me, guys, I would not support this to be a partisan thing. I would say, no, I do not support school board to be partisan if it were me. So if you're in Florida, I just don't understand why you need that to be partisan. Like Roger is saying here, this is a really good point. Florida Amendment 2, the right to hunt and fish amendment for all you hunters and fishers out there, those who like to do so, partake in that. It says a yes vote supports establishing a constitutional right to hunt and fish in Florida. A no vote opposes that. Okay. So I was surprised to see this one because I was like, I thought you could just do that anyway. But it says, again, a supermajority is required for the approval of this amendment. And what it says here is that as of 2023, a total of 23 states had constitutional provisions that protected the right to hunt and fish. And the first one was Vermont in 1777, and 22 additional states followed with Alabama in 1996. So that's interesting. This is supported by Republican senator, representatives, and House Speaker. Some of the organizations, All for Florida, America Sport Fishing Association, and Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, to name a few. We're not going to go through all of those. You can see that for yourself. It goes on to say, one of the arguments here, Florida is an incredibly important state for the sport fishing industry and is considered the fishing capital of the world. Our state attracts more than 4.3 million anglers who make fishing in Florida an economic engine that contributes nearly 14 billion in economic output and supports more than 120,000 jobs. I can see that. The opposition to this is Humane Wildlife Consulting of South Florida. That's one of the corporations that opposes it. One of the organizations are the American Ecosystem and Bear Defenders. I love that name. I kind of like that. Bear Defenders. Oh, man. Then it goes on to say one of the arguments here from the Wildlife Consulting. They say that we are in the midst of a global extinction crisis and a climate crisis. Our wildlife need a break from the carnage. We should be accelerating measures to alleviate the harm being done and mitigate the damage. So they are opposing it due to extinction, and there is zero money spent to support this measure, and there's 5,725 spent to oppose it. And remember what I've said before about the money. Oftentimes, whichever option here has the most money that's spent, that's usually the way that it goes for the vote. So just something to keep in mind. Not always, but usually. Here's a good one, ladies and gentlemen. Puff, puff, pass. Florida Amendment 3, Marijuana Legalization Initiative. What is up, fam? I just want to give a shout out to Colorado, because Colorado, you guys were the ones, I think, that really started this path. And then it made its way to us in Massachusetts, and we voted on it and we legalized, marijuana here in Massachusetts. And it's just, more states are popping up, and now it seems like it's an option in Florida. This is a measure that I have seen has bipartisan support. I know Republicans that approve of this. I know Democrats that approve of this. At the end of the day, I think both parties like to puff, puff, pass. All right. Marijuana Legalization Initiative. Here we go. Bum, 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 bum. A yes vote supports legalizing marijuana for adults 21 years old and older and allowing individuals to possess up to 3 ounces of marijuana. Oh, snap. Samantha said, I'm voting yes on this. There it is. There it is. Again, supermajority vote required. You use 60% to approve this one, guys. So again, make sure you get out there and vote. This is why I tell people don't stay home, especially if you live in a ballot initiative state. Who supports this? There is a corporation called True Leave that supports it. Also, interesting. Howard Bellamy, musical artist, David Bellamy, musical artist, and John Morgan, who's a lawyer. One of the arguments here, I want to read the one from the Bellamy brothers, actually. As we travel the country, we see the benefits of adult use, and as Florida residents, we love the Freedom State moniker and believe that Florida needs to join the millions of Americans who adults are free to use cannabis without fear of being incarcerated. Well, hell yeah. How else can you say it? Are we doing opposition first? Yeah. Who opposes this? Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Your whack ass governor, Ron DeSantis, and Florida Attorney General Ashley B. Moody, and the Republican Party of Florida, corporations, My Florida Green, organizations, Drug Free America Foundation, and Florida Chamber of Commerce. So Ron DeSantis is heavily against this, right? So let's see one of the arguments here. I just want to make sure I see if he gave more. Let me tell you what he said. The initiatives are very, very extreme. Once voters figure out how radical both of those are, they're going to fail. It's basically a license to have it anywhere you want. So no time, place, and manner restrictions. This state will start to smell like marijuana in our cities and towns. Let me tell you something, Ron. Ron DeSantis, you come across to me as pretty tight. You seem like you wrap too tight. You seem to be very uncomfortable in social spaces. You look uncomfortable. You're also kind of a psychopath. There's also the time that you spent at Guantanamo Bay where you tortured people. If anything, I would think that you could use a little smoky smoke. Maybe it might loosen you up a little bit. Maybe not have you walking around like your butt is clenched together. So if anything, I think you could use a little bit of smoky smoke. Then you won't be such a tight ass. So there's that. There's that. Ay. Something so incredibly popular. Jesus Christ. There is 61, holy shit, over $61 million that is spent to support it. And there is over 125,000 spent to oppose it. So it's probably going to pass. So it's just, he does. He looks uncomfortable. Puff, puff, pass. I'm sorry. It's true. I've never seen someone rap that tight before. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. A point that Roger made here is that if it gets ratified into Florida Constitution, they're going to have to make a public bank so that local community banks and credit unions can partner with the local statewide bank to take in deposits. You just can't have all that cash on hand. Yeah. Here's another big one in Florida, Amendment 4, right to abortion initiative. So like I said, Florida has some pretty big ones this year. A yes vote supports establishing a constitutional right to abortion before fetal viability. A no vote opposes establishing a constitutional right to abortion before fetal liability. Again, 60% majority is needed. The supporters of this measure are Democrats. Of course, Joe Biden supports this. Frederica Wilson, Lauren Book, Jason Pizzo, unions, SEIO, excuse me, I almost said SEIOU, SEIU 1199 Florida supports this. Organizations, ACLU of Florida and Florida Rising, to name a few, the League of Women Voters. And one of the arguments here, this is actually from, let's get the argument from the Senate Minority Leader, Lauren. The fight for freedom has never been more critical. Despite the fact that abortion is no longer a partisan issue for Americans, elected Republicans across the U.S. are working to take away access to women's health care. We must not back down. And who is opposed? Of course, Ron DeSantis and Ashley B. Moody, the Republican Party of Florida, the Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops, Florida Family Policy Council, Florida Right to Life. Is interesting because they used to perform abortions at Catholic churches way, way back in the day. One of the arguments here is that the sponsors of this extreme amendment want to legalize abortion up until the moment of birth and to repeal all limitations and regulations on abortion, even safety regulations that protect women, because they want to make Florida the home of late-term abortions in the Southeast. So you see how exaggerated that is? It's just, I don't. Okay, so there is over $32.2 million that is spent to support it, over $519,000 spent to oppose it. So another interesting one where I said, like, again, more money spent to pass. And then we have another homestead one. Florida Amendment 5, annual inflation adjustment for homestead property tax exemption value amendment. Values. All right. A yes vote supports an annual inflation adjustment to the amount of assessed value that is exempt from property taxation. Here we go with property taxes again. Who supports this? Republicans, James Buchanan, to name a few. I forgot that guy was still around. And of course, the Florida League of Cities. There's no money spent to support or oppose that. So this was interesting. Florida Amendment 6, repeal of public financing for statewide campaigns amendment. Well. A yes vote supports repealing the state constitutional provision that provides for public financing of campaigns for those running for elective statewide office who agree to campaign spending limits. Now, who is supporting this? State Senator Travis Hudson. Here's the argument here. We're putting it to the voters to make the decision on whether we should spend general revenue funds helping candidates run for office or on other means that could help our constituents. I think it's absurd that anybody would be able to use taxpayer dollars for the purposes of campaigning. So those dollars we could spend on things like education, healthcare, water projects, beach restoration, all that stuff. Who opposes this? Democrats, Tina Polsky and Anna Escamani. The intention is if you're running against an incumbent or someone of greater means, that you can leverage your small dollar support and maximize that by receiving public funds. Public money levels the political playing field. Interesting. There is no money spent to support or oppose it. And a note here from Roger, repeal of a public financing of elections amendment that was ratified into Florida Constitution. This repeal is a legislative referred constitutional amendment, meaning it was put forth on by the legislature. Of course, they want to go back of being corrupt and not have to be challenged by the grassroots. Floridians, please reject this amendment. Don't let this sneak right under your nose and slide by. Guys, you see, this is why I tell you, don't stay home. This one's a big one. So if you're in Florida, please make sure you vote no on Amendment 6. Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to punish the grassroots. So let's not let that happen, okay? Based. That's Florida, ladies and gentlemen. We still have more states to go. I will be back live on Sunday, so you can join me then. And let's go ahead and do this. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Jimmy Dore reported on the changes of in the Posse Comitatus Act recently. Before, only National Guard and Coast Guard could be deployed domestically with few exceptions. That's interesting. Interesting. All right, guys, that's the show tonight. I am not streaming Friday night. I'm off tomorrow, but there will be clips for you from tonight's show. So if you're new to my show, I have live stream. I have different stories throughout the stream. And then my producer, Eric, will clip each story. And then I produce those stories as clips. So you'll have 3 clips tomorrow for Friday, 2 for Saturday, 1 for Sunday, I believe. And then I'll be live again Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern. So usually I am live on Friday night, but tomorrow night I'm not because I'm hanging out with the fam. So thank you guys so much. Okay, go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry. Thank you, Laugh66. 10% increase in tax on Wall Street investor returns until cash reparations is done. Ooh, Laugh66 is thinking about some things. Thank you, Roger. I'm sorry. Sab, anything that's a hindrance can be used as a lever to reach your goal. The omnibus bills and why it is so hard to get rid of and go to single issue bills is usually the politicians use that to sneak in things that it stood on its own would never pass. So they attach it to pass in the bills. Yeah, Sab, let's not be so quick to get rid of it. Attaching to a must pass bill might just be how we get reparations. Oh, I didn't think about that. That's a good point. You don't have to wonder what a world governed without parties would look like. The example already exists in a nonpartisan school board election is the best example of how we can govern in the absence of parties. Sab, the people who put weed on the ballot should have hired you. Imagine that as a slogan, puff, puff, pass the amendment. However, if you don't already have an infrastructure in place that fully democratized the profits via worker co-ops, then all it means is corporate cannabis will corner and oligarchize the market, pushing all potential small mom and pop shops out, plus those who are incarcerated due to it being illegal from being able to participate. Just look at Massachusetts and New York State. Yeah. And that is something, I think we did give pushback to Governor Baker about the fact that the other part of this was supposed to be that you were supposed to free the prisoners that were imprisoned for marijuana, right? So that piece wasn't met, unfortunately. But Floridians, go out and vote in November. If you're not interested in the presidential election, I get it. I understand. I hear you. I feel you. But don't just sit on the couch because you have the opportunity to pass the puff, puff, pass. So always go vote for those ballot measures. That is it for me tonight, guys. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.